Victory Monday, and welcome to 580 Sports Talk. Brendan Dworzinski and Dan Lucero here with you on this Monday afternoon. With you until 6 o'clock today. It is a Victory Monday, but it is a little bit of a different Victory Monday. It is a not sour Victory Monday, but certainly it's not a cool drink of water after a hard day's work.
It's a Victory Monday, but you're not breathing normally.
Yeah,
you're halted heart rate perhaps a little bit.
It's a weird day because you're happy the Chiefs are going back to the AFC Championship game
for a fifth consecutive season,
Booker T style, 5 times.
Only been accomplished 3 times in the history of the sport. And never in the NFC. It's only ever been done in the AFC. So I hope that Chiefs fans everywhere did take a moment, find a moment over the weekend to appreciate the rarity and the enormity of the accomplishment of making it to this particular checkpoint, being one of the last 2 teams standing in the conference for 5 consecutive years. Don't take it for granted.
No, do not take it for granted. And that is something that is worth celebrating and being excited about. It is also entirely fair if you are in a mode of near panic because Patrick Mahomes could not walk 5 steps without hopping for the majority of the game. He'll get fired up, usually in an excited way, fired up for a teammate, do the fist pump. He'll, against the Bears, he'll count up all the picks before him and all that. Never seen him on the sideline get mad before. Even when he's had little spats with Eric Bieniemy, it's usually fairly low-key, but since it's him, it seems like a bigger deal because, A, he's Patrick Mahomes, and B, he just doesn't show that. He's throwing jackets on the field. He's yelling at people, possibly even including Andy Reid. He did not want to go get x-rays on that ankle on Saturday.
I'm not much of a mind reader, but I caught hell no, and then I caught another 4-letter word that I can't repeat, followed by the word no.
Yeah.
He wanted to be in that football game. And I think Andy Reid did right by his quarterback. The only thing to do was to send him for an x-ray and make sure that nothing was broken. And once nothing was broken, then Mahomes came out, and even in a state of being on 1.5 legs charitably, he was still enough to lift the Chiefs to a 5th consecutive AFC Championship game in the second half. And now we don't have the foggiest idea how that's going to affect him or not affect him when Sunday rolls around and the boogeyman comes to Arrowhead Stadium.
And the Chiefs and Mahomes and Reid, they are doing everything they can to indicate that it's no big deal. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them for playing that up. But they got Jay Glazer out here carrying water for them. Mahomes said right after the game, it's actually not all that bad. Yeah, dude, okay. You literally could not walk on the field. I think it's kind of a big deal. We don't know exactly how that's going to impact him, though. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the game itself. A hard-fought win. I know the Jags kicked a field goal at the end of the game to cover the spread, which had my whole Twitter timeline buzzing. But I had a thought with 2 minutes left in the game. Not all scores are created equal. This 27-17 feels way different than all the way back in late October, early November, whenever it was 27-17 Chiefs over the Jaguars. Then this one ended up being 27-20. But we'll get to every angle of the game. We will also, of course, take a look back at all of the action from the divisional round of the playoffs. A wild divisional weekend to a degree. Wild in the sense that, wow, the Eagles really are that good. Wild as in, wow, did Buffalo even care? Wow as in, does Mike McCarthy have green jello for a brain? Like, that's the kind of wow we got. Chiefs, Jags ended up being the second most competitive game of the weekend, and the Chiefs were up pretty much the entire game.
Yeah.
Fairly comfortably at the end of the game. So we'll talk all about the weekend that was in the NFL. Matt Verderame is going to join us bottom of this hour, as he does every Monday, for our weekly look around the National Football League. We'll also get our initial thoughts on Bengals versus Chiefs. Is this Bengals Chiefs 2, or are we going to call this Bengals Chiefs 4? Burrow Mahomes, I guess.
This is Burrow Mahomes 4.
Okay,
like,
I think that's fair.
Yeah, you count the regular season meetings. Yeah.
It's been all Bengals so far. Usually you don't get to 4 when the same entity wins every single meeting. Usually at that point, HBO Boxing says, okay, we've seen enough.
Yeah.
We don't need any more of this. We don't need any more Logan Paul. But, although he keeps winning. Anyways,
we did get a lot of Rocky movies, though.
We did. That's true.
Rocky kept winning. Well, no, I guess
he lost the first one.
Yeah, he did. He didn't win at the end of the first one. That's a bad job by me. I know he lost sorry, spoiler alert. I know he lost to Creed in the first one. I know that.
It's a great movie. All-time great movie.
Classic.
Is it Stallone's best film?
It's one of those Rocky films is his best film.
Yeah. I mean, Rocky won Best Picture.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll talk all about that. Initial thoughts on Burrow versus Mahomes 4, Chiefs versus Bengals 4 coming up next weekend. We'll get to that later on in the show today. Also, we've got a bunch of college basketball to get to. K-State, tough game against Texas Tech. I think, to me at least, it was not a surprise it was a tough game against Texas Tech, but they showed their mettle, showed their toughness, ended up pulling away with the victory. KU got housed by TCU. It was the kind of game, to me, where, look at the box score. I'm not surprised that all this happens. Sometimes you have letdown games. Here's the problem. It came right after a tough letdown game in which only one guy scored the ball. Well, it happened at home. You suffered your second worst home loss ever. And now you got to play tonight against a team that, even though they're not as good as they've been the last 3 years, pretty unforgiving in the Baylor Bears. So we'll talk all about KU and K-State basketball, including a preview of Big Monday coming up on the show today. You are welcome to be a part of the show as well on the Big O Tires text line. 785-272-9429 is the text line number. And, of course, the comment section is open on YouTube. Sports on 580 WIBW is our YouTube channel. So swing on by if you'd like to chat about anything that we are talking about on the show today. By the way, this is just popped up while I'm mentioning college basketball. If you are one of the people who hates Fran Fraschilla, you're in luck. No Fran tonight.
No Fran tonight?
No Fran tonight. Very odd. Jay Billis.
Oh, we get the A team.
Not really, because Boog Shambi is doing the play-by-play.
I like Boog.
I like Boog too. It's just not like Shulman and Billis.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm excited for Jay Billis to tell me that he's smarter than me for 2 hours tonight. That'll be fun. Anyway, we'll talk more college basketball later on. Not a big Billis guy. The Chiefs beat the Jaguars, and we'll get to the Mahomes injury second because we've already touched on it a little bit. It wasn't necessarily pretty for most of the game, but the Chiefs did what they had to do, what we knew they were going to have to do going into that game to pick up the win. The defense was great. I thought the defense was up to the task. I thought Spags called a great game. Late in the game, fourth quarter, I don't believe it was the Lawrence interception, but I thought to myself, they had a blitz at the end of the game, and I thought, wow, Spags was waiting for that all game long. It was one of the last 2 drives the Jaguars had. I thought Spags called a great game. Frank Clark, if every game was the playoffs, Frank Clark might be the greatest defensive player of all time.
Yeah, playoff Frank Clark is a thing. Like, that's a real live thing. And he was terrific. I mean, you better be. If you're going to spend all week talking about how you're about to see a show, you better go put on a show.
No doubt.
And Frank Clark did. He had a massive play in that game. The sack that dropped Jacksonville out of field goal range when it's 10-7 and nobody knows if Patrick Mahomes is going to take another snap in the game. Like, that was a pivotal moment. And the Chiefs defense came up with a stop, forced the punt that set up the 98-yard touchdown drive that Chad Henne ended up leading, that gave the Chiefs the 2-score lead. That they let them have Jacksonville at arm's length, which is just about where they kept them for the rest of the afternoon. I think the defense was really good. I think they allow you look at the final total, and they allow 20 points. 3 of those in garbage time and 7 of those on a short field after the long kickoff return by Agnew. And they forced the 2 turnovers. That's another thing that's kind of underrated about what the Chiefs have done here down the stretch. Mm-hmm. That's 3 of the last 4 games they haven't turned the ball over. If you go back to the end of the regular season, didn't turn over against Seattle week 16, didn't turn over against the Raiders week 18, didn't turn over against the Jags on Saturday. And defensively, they forced 2. They get a big break with the Agnew fumble. Huge break. But look, you've got to be in position to capitalize on that break. You got to be in position. And the Chiefs were. They have 4 guys around that ball, and they were able to recover that fumble. And then Jalen Watson makes a stupendous interception to all but seal the game. Another well-timed blitz call by Steve Spagnuolo. And Jalen Watson makes a spectacular play on the outside. I thought, with very few exceptions, the Chiefs secondary played really well. They got beat on one play. Christian Kirk couldn't quite come up with a pass that he probably should have come up with. but the corners I thought in man-to-man played really well. I thought that the defensive line, they weren't spectacular, but they were good. I thought it was a solid defensive effort. And again, you look at it at the end of the game, that's 20 points, 7 on a short field, 3 in garbage time. That's a pretty strong performance. And that's going to be good enough to win when you have the offense that the Chiefs have. So you take that performance from the defense 10 times out of 10.
We should also mention Chris Jones, I thought, played really well. I know he didn't get a sack. He can play well without getting sacks, and I thought he did this weekend. I thought he played a really good game. Defensively, overall, A++. The offense wasn't great, but again, it was good enough. But it's hard to be great when your all-world quarterback is on a bad ankle, playing with a high ankle sprain. He got so much vitamin T in that locker room, tore it all, if you will.
More like Perk Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, the first time he handed the ball off after returning to the game, he took 2 steps back and then hopped into the handoff. I thought, this dude's not going to make it to the third quarter.
That's exactly what I thought too. Like there was no way I thought at that point that he would finish the game. And the fact that they called another outside stretch play later in the game when he was out there on one leg, that was just crazy to me. That play has to unfold quick. And it's hard to have that play unfold as it needs to with the timing that you need to have when your quarterback can't get back to the running back like he usually does.
And Collinsworth was all over that on TV. He said, look, these plays aren't going, you want this to be a core concept of this offense on the ground, but this isn't going to work if Mahomes can't move fluidly to get the ball to Pacheco, McKinnon, whoever else. We ended up getting what kind of looked like old man Mahomes because guys who move like him, he's not a runner, but he's an effective runner. He runs a lot like Aaron Rodgers did when he was at his peak, where he doesn't necessarily want to run, but if he has to, he's going to tear you up.
You're not going to confuse him with like Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson or anybody like that, but the ability to pick his spots and to be dangerous enough, not just in the running game, gaining yards on runs, on scrambles, but that mobility to extend plays.
Laterally,
be able to make sure there's enough time for somebody to pop open against good coverage.
Without having that ability, he kind of was, and again, to compare him to Aaron Rodgers, like Rodgers doesn't run very much anymore. He's much more in the pocket, make the reads, got to be progression-based. If it's not there, you almost have to throw it away. Mahomes couldn't move. He ran at one point. He ran up to the right, and I thought, he just crumpled up in a heap. I think it was his first drive back in the game, and I thought, oh my God, this is ridiculous. He looks like he's 30%. I just watched Eddie Lampkin play at 15% health on a terrible ankle in the KU-TCU game. He looks just as bad. But it worked, and they made it work, and they found ways to still make that offense click. The drive of the game, obviously, was the Chad Henne drive, going 98 yards. Got some help from penalties, but to be able to get it in the end zone there, that was huge. That really was, it felt like at that point, okay, the Chiefs are going to win this game no matter what Jacksonville's best effort is. And Jacksonville tried hard. That team is clearly better than they were back in week 10. They've got the quarterback. I know he wasn't great for much of the game, but he's the dude. I think it's pretty apparent that he's the guy. Peterson's the perfect fit. They're going to add Calvin Ridley to that team in all likelihood next year. They're going to be pretty darn good. They're probably going to dominate a really, really bad division for quite a while, I would think. At least it's possible to. Chiefs they had a few more dudes. They've got a Hall of Fame coach, as good as the coach Peterson is, and Mahomes on one leg is still better than pretty much any other quarterback out there. So it wasn't pretty, but overall, I think you can be, again, in a vacuum, ignoring the injury, which obviously a huge deal, but you can still be pretty content with that output. There's
a great line in the Bo Jackson 30 for 30. You Don't Know Bo, the documentary about Bo Jackson, where the ESPN personality Bomani Jones is talking about Bo Jackson on Tecmo Bowl, where Tecmo Bo Jackson is the greatest video game athlete of all time. And there was only one running play that was designed for Bo Jackson. And Bomani Jones says, why was there only one run play for Bo Jackson? Because it would have been unfair to give him 2. And I had the same thought on Saturday, watching the Chiefs move the ball down the field with Mahomes on one leg, particularly the touchdown drive and the pass he throws to Marquez Valdez-Scantling to give the Chiefs their 2-score lead back. After the first drive of the game in particular, the football gods gave Mahomes only one leg because it would have been unfair to give him 2. I thought the opening drive of the game was so good from Kansas City. They could have named their final score.
Mm-hmm.
They had a really good matchup as it was against Jacksonville, because Jacksonville can't cover a tight end. And who the Chiefs have? The best tight end of his generation. And he had a monster game, 14 catches, most for a tight end in a playoff game ever. Absolutely terrific stuff from Kelsey. And the Chiefs were set up in that way to beat Jacksonville. I think they would have had a monster game if Mahomes had not had to go out. And I think that's reflected in the fact they went a 98-yard touchdown drive with Chad Henne at quarterback.
And very methodical.
Yes.
Just very classic West Coast offense kind of look. Moving down the field again, helped out to get a penalty or two on the drive. Great play at the goal line, made it as easy as possible for Henne to get the ball in. I saw someone put on Twitter, and I wish I could give credit for who this was, but if you're the Jaguars, who went through some of your worst years in a generally pretty sad existence as a franchise, with Chad Henne as your starting quarterback, only for him to be the backup who comes in and leads a 98-yard touchdown drive against you in the playoffs, it's got to make you sick.
I think we have a question from the Big O Tires text line from 75 that asked, do you think Henne could have won the game if Mahomes didn't come back? The fact that Mahomes did come back, I think, should answer that question for you. Like, they could have, like, theoretically, but it's the playoffs. Like, you don't leave that to chance. If it had been week 7, yeah, you try and gut it out with Chad Henne and see what happens. But I don't know if they were going to entrust that all to Chad Henne, but boy, what a great luxury it is to have a veteran backup quarterback in that spot, and a guy who knows how to prepare and knows how to be ready for anything, and who's been in that spot in the divisional round of the playoffs, having to come in after a Mahomes injury and make it work and move the ball and generate first downs and find a way to finish out a win. Henne had done that before. He'd been in that spot before and done it, so he was able to do it again. It was a great drive that he led. I think it was Mina Kimes from ESPN on Twitter who pointed out that the current iteration of the Chiefs offense, more so than probably even the one from the original Anything is Possible game, the current iteration of Chiefs offense is probably better designed for a backup quarterback to be able to step in and have success, because it's not so predicated on the deep ball or long developing routes. The offensive line now is better than it was then. The running game now is better than it was then. So it was a good situation for Henne to step into, and he deserves a huge tip of the cap for getting the job done. Then Mahomes came in, and it didn't go as smoothly in the second half, obviously, as it did in the first. But for that drive, when their lead is down to 3 in the fourth quarter, and they got to put something together because the stadium's starting to get a little nervous, and it was an outstanding drive. Just an outstanding drive. The touchdown pass to MVS was great. Mahomes on one leg is still better than half the quarterbacks in the NFL. And we'll see, and there'll be obviously plenty of time over the course of the next week to speculate on what that injury means and how he's going to look against Cincinnati. Cincinnati likes to keep quarterbacks in the pocket. Yeah. Patrick Mahomes threw more touchdown passes in the pocket than any quarterback in the NFL this year. Like, he's not just this play has to be broken and off schedule for me to do my thing kind of quarterback. He showed on that drive that eventually provided the winning points. He showed on that drive he's just as capable of stepping up and getting the ball out quick and doing the kinds of things he's going to have to do against the Cincinnati defense.
Well, and I think that's interesting. We'll get to this more in the 4:00 hour when we get some initial thoughts on Chiefs versus Bengals. But we might end up in this game getting similar approaches by the two quarterbacks that get the snap, get the ball out, but for entirely different reasons. For the Bengals, it's because they're playing with 3 backup offensive linemen, and I got to give them credit. We'll talk about this later. They were awesome against the Bills. I know that's not a great Bills front without Von Miller out there. They were awesome on the offensive line. Generally speaking, though, you're not going to trust a unit that's made up of so many backups. So Burrow has to get the ball out much quicker so he's not getting destroyed when normally they would like to wait for vertical things to develop a little bit more. On the Chiefs side, they generally have the offensive line, although Orlando Brown, shaky, but they've generally got the offensive line to provide the protection, but Mahomes can't scramble, or likely will not be able to scramble to that degree. So those long developing vertical concepts that depend on Mahomes rolling out or making things happen with his legs first, those are probably not going to be available. So we're going to end up kind of coming full circle. 2 quarterbacks who have to get the ball out for entirely different reasons, which I think is going to make this a fascinating matchup. Again, we'll talk more about that coming up later on in the show today. We'll also look at the entire weekend that was in the divisional round with Matt Verderame and just us two as well. Right now, we've got to take our first time out of the show. We've got a quick edition of the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, recapping the long football weekend coming up here on 580 Sports Talk. We're recapping the weekend with the good, the bad, and the ugly here on 580 Sports Talk. Dan, would you like to go first with your good this week?
Sure, I can do that. The Kansas State Wildcats are a top 5 team.
Yeah, they are.
In the country, up to number 5 in the latest AP poll. We're going to talk plenty more Big 12 hoops at the top of the 4 o'clock hour. But that was not an easy matchup for them. Texas Tech, desperate, a big body team, the kind of team that K-State can struggle with a little bit. And they had them on the ropes, but K-State responded brilliantly. And it went so well that they even played Sandstorm. And nobody said anything profane.
It's working. Jerome Tang's work is working.
Jerome Tang is a real live miracle worker.
Yeah. Good for them. That is awesome. That is a good win over Texas Tech. I know they're 0-7 or whatever it is in league play. That's a tough game. That is a really tough game, especially in this league. That's a really good win for K-State. They deserve to be top 5. I had it in our notes. Polls or not, they should be in the top 5. Absolutely should be the case. My good, the Highland Park Scots, man. We got to see them at the TIT this weekend for the first time all season. Look, we cover high school sports. I'm fairly in tune with it. You're fairly in tune with what people think, what people say, and a lot of, oh, yeah, but they moved conferences. Level of competition is different. Their boys' team's undefeated, but are they really that good? Yeah, guys, they're really that good. It is freakish the way they play basketball. Wichita Southeast might not be the best team in the Wichita City League, but that's a pretty darn good team, very physical team.
And athletically, one of the very few teams Highland Park is going to play all year that matches up with them.
And Highland Park whooped them up and down the floor for 32 minutes, almost exactly 32 minutes. The game was played with a running clock in the fourth quarter, and Park still put up 18 points in the quarter. I mean, it was ridiculous. Then they beat Lawrence, a top 10 team in Class 6A, by 11. They didn't trail after the first 3 minutes of that game. Shout out to Highland Park, their first Peak Invitational Tournament win in 10 years. Mike Williams has built something really, really special with that team, led by a couple of unbelievable athletes, great role players. Just a blast to watch them play, and big congrats to Mike Williams and Highland Park. You're bad for the weekend.
So my bad for the weekend is the way the Buffalo Bills went out sad. Yeah. I mean, Cincinnati deserves a ton of credit. They played an outstanding game. They went on the road and they put it on the Bills for 60 minutes. But man, I got to tell you, I thought the Bills had a little bit more in them than that effort. They just kind of looked lethargic, just kind of looked listless. And I wonder, if this is something that they're going to be able to recover easily from, or if the Bills have already missed the best chance they're going to get in this first Josh Allen window.
Yeah, my bad for the weekend is just the losers of Sunday's game. Like Saturday, Jags played tough. We knew the Chiefs were the better team. They played tough. They covered the spread. So good for you, Jacksonville. And the Giants are who we thought they were. They were playing with house money. Like Everyone thought they'd get waxed by the Eagles. That's fine. The Bills went out in the most uninspired way possible. That's the Bills we've been talking about as one of the best teams in the league all year. And then the Cowboys, that was a close game. Mike McCarthy's an idiot. He is a moron. And Dak, he is who he is. And that is who he will always be. He doesn't always have the most help, but he also doesn't help himself all that much. It's just an unbelievable embarrassment of a way to lose last night.
Bad could have gone for me in terms of the bad timing of unveiling my Dak Prescott is underrated take 2 days before he does that. And lays that stink bomb in Santa Clara. My ugly, and we are going to get to this in great detail and with great glee later on, but the final play of the game the Dallas Cowboys run on Sunday is the absolute stupidest thing I've ever seen in a playoff game.
Let's put Ezekiel Elliott at center. That's all you need to know. You can guess how the rest of the play went. Plus, they made him eat dirt. They shoved his face right in the dirt. Incredible. Great comedy.
Like he got hit by a car.
That's a very fitting ugly. Mine is that KU lost by 23 points at home. That is the second worst loss in KU history at Allen Fieldhouse.
And the worst with fans in the stands.
Yeah, that stunk. The last one, by the way, they lost by 25 to Texas in 2021. Fake season, though. COVID season doesn't count. That does it for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Coming up, we will talk to Matt Verderame, who covers the NFL for Fansided.com. He joins us next right here on 580 Sports Talk.
I'm Frank Miller with Your Money.
You can also go find him on Twitter at Matt Verderame. And Matt, lots to get to from this weekend, but obviously the most important story for us is the health of the ankle for Patrick Mahomes. Just in general, after you saw that injury and saw how he was reacting and just walking around on the field, where is your concern level going forward with the high ankle sprain of Patrick Mahomes?
I think it's high in the sense that he's the best player in the world, and if he's not 100%, it makes things a lot more difficult. At the same point, maybe I'm in the minority. I never thought he wasn't going to finish that game. I just felt like just the way he was, the way he was reacting when they told him he had to go on for x-rays. I thought unless they found something on the x-ray, I figured he was going to play. I thought he played pretty well once he came back. I mean, very well by most people's standards, pretty well by his. You know, look, he's going to play on Sunday. You worry a little bit more. I mean, this one is his right ankle. His previous ankle sprain, high ankle sprain, was his left ankle. You're going to drive off the right one. But this is also not you or me getting a high ankle sprain. This is a guy who's going to be around world-class medicine and trainers all week long. I think they'll probably get him into pretty good shape for the game. My biggest concern is if he re-aggravates during the game.
It was kind of unique to see him as a pocket passer, right? Because he was struggling so much to move side to side, back and forth. I mean, there were a couple times he tried to hand the ball off, and he essentially had to hop into the handoff. But we kind of got to look at what 40-year-old Patrick Mahomes might look like trying to stick in the pocket and throw that way.
You can do worse at 40 years old. Listen, I think the one thing I've heard a lot of people say, like, well, does this help the Chiefs in some way? Because I don't know. I don't think anytime that the best player on your team is hobbled, it doesn't make you any better. I will say this. I do think it might make the rest of the team have a little bit more urgency in this game. Like, hey, we can't just wait for him to go win us the football game. If you're the defense, I think there has to be an idea, but look, we got to go win the football game. We can't let Cincinnati score 27 or 30 points in this thing. I think up front, the offensive line, it's undoubtedly going to be a mantra all week. He cannot get touched. We've got to protect him. You wonder if the offensive coaching staff says, look, we got to run the ball a little bit more in this game. We've got to be able to blow them off the ball. Now, Cincinnati gets paid too, and they're pretty damn good. I don't think the Bengals are just going to roll over because they want to get out of the way from the Chiefs. But I would think that all this throughout this week is going to provide some impetus for the Chiefs, the rest of those guys on the roster, to really play about as well as they can possibly play.
Outside of the Mahomes injury, which I know is kind of a fool's errand because that was the biggest story of the game and obviously impacted the way the game unfolded on Saturday afternoon, but what else stood out to you the most about the way the Chiefs were able to hold off the Jaguars? Obviously, a couple of late turnovers by the Jags really did them in. The Jamal Agnew fumble, the Lawrence pick on the far sideline. But overall, what did you think of the game and what stood out to you the most about how the Chiefs were able to hold off Jacksonville?
I think it's two things, and I wrote about one of them for Stacking the Box this morning. One of them was their heart. I thought a lot of teams, when Mahomes went out at 10-7 in the second quarter, I thought a lot of teams would have just kind of either folded up to 10 or at the very least been shell-shocked a little bit and taken a while to recover. That 98-yard drive by Chad Henne, right after that happened, is one of the great drives in that team's history. And not just like current team, like franchise history, but for them take the ball in a playoff game with their backup quarterback, who hasn't played a meaningful snap in 2 years, and just go right down the field, to me showed you they are more than just Patrick Mahomes. That they have a lot of heart in ways maybe that even they didn't know they had. The other thing I thought was, even when Mahomes came back to start second half, they were not good early in the third quarter and into the fourth. Before they scored their final touchdown drive, which they started with about 11 and a half minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They had 3 drives with Mahomes in the third. They went for 54 total yards of it. 51 or 54 total yards. They could not move the ball. And yet, when they needed it the most, they went 75 yards on 10 plays. They scored a touchdown. I thought the defense, though, has lost a little bit in that. They really stepped up when needed. They held Jacksonville time and again during that stretch. And then at the end, they sealed it with 2 big takeaways, something they struggled to get this season.
Our guest is Matt Verderame of fansided.com. He joins us every Monday here on 580 Sports Talk. You can find Matt's work, including the Stacking the Box column and podcast at fansided.com. And you can check him out on Twitter at Matt Verderame. As for the other AFC game yesterday, Matt, the Cincinnati Bengals go to Buffalo and really thump the Bills, advancing to their second straight AFC Championship game. I'll get to the Bengals in a moment, but what does this mean for the Bills? Where are they at now, having been eliminated from the playoffs before the Super Bowl each of the last 3 years, the divisional round now the last 2 years after they went to the AFC Championship game in 2020? Where do they go from here? Obviously, they have Josh Allen. It's a great building block. A lot of franchises would be happy to have. But what does this loss say about what the Bills need to make that next step?
This loss is devastating to them. You know, I was asked late last week, who has the most pressure of any of these 8 teams in the divisional round? And I said Buffalo, because they were the preseason Super Bowl consensus pick. I mean, everybody, including me, by the way, picked them to win the Super Bowl. They went out and spent $120 million on Von Miller, and that looked like a really good investment. He got hurt on Thanksgiving. So that game cannot happen if you're Buffalo. Look, if they had played Cincinnati, and it was a great game, like the 13 seconds game a year ago, and they lost, it would still be crushing. But I think if you're a Bills, you could at least go, we're right there, we're right there. They're not right there. That game was, they're lucky they only lost by 17 points. If the Bengals really wanted to at the end of the game, they easily would have scored again. And it's not going to get hard for the Bills. It's going to get really hard because Edmonds is a free agent, Poyer's a free agent, Singletary's a free agent. They're going to have to make a decision this offseason with Gabe Davis. He's got 1 year left on his rookie deal, so it's not like they're going to lose him. But do you pay him? Because if he gets the free agency next year, he's probably gone. I don't think they're going to tag him for $20-some million. I don't think that's going to happen. The Bills now watch Allen's cap hit go from mid-teen money to $40 million a year. Like, they're now going to enter what the Chiefs have entered, where the Chiefs had to trade away Tyreek Hill and let Ward and Matthews walk. So I think, look, the other part of this is, too, in the regular season, their defense has been great. Their defense has gotten lit up each of the last 3 years on their way out the door in the playoffs. The Bengals just lit them up. The Chiefs the last 2 years, 38 and 42 points. Is it the right coaching staff? Because at some juncture, you do have to look at this and go, Bills are very talented. Bills are a Super Bowl caliber roster, but they don't play like it in these big spots. And at some point, you got to start looking at why. Maybe the coaching staff is part of the reason.
As for the Bengals, they dominate that game. They go back to Arrowhead, where they beat the Chiefs to win the AFC Championship last year. For the Chiefs, what is the biggest adjustment they have to make from the previous 3 meetings with the Bengals, all losses, to make sure that their season doesn't end in the exact same fashion this year?
To me, this game's really easy to break down. Really easy. Beyond the uncertainty of Mahomes' right ankle. If the Chiefs get pressure with 4 and they don't lose the turnover battle, they'll win the game. If they don't do those 2 things, they'll lose. Because the last 2 games, they have gotten 2 total sacks on Burrow. He has not been touched. He has sat in the pocket. He's had no issue. Their secondary has been good. The Chiefs have not had a problem covering things, which might be surprising to people. The Chiefs have actually done a really good job in coverage. That's not been the issue. Their issue has been that Burrow just sits back there. Now, he has not thrown for 300 yards in either of those 2 games. In the AFC Championship game, really, he was okay. Went for 250, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Like, he wasn't overwhelming, but in big spots, you know, they even occasionally would get a little pressure. You know, Jones famously in the AFC title game had a few pressures. They couldn't bring Burrow down, and that's kind of the key here. It can't just be a little bit of pressure. They've got to sack him. It's got to be. You got to get negative plays. Got to get him to the ground. The Chiefs the last 2 games, and even really the first time they played each other, the Chiefs sacked them 4 times in that game. They blitzed like crazy. I mean, a big reason that they sacked them so much was all these blitzes. They have to be able to win with 4. If they win with 4 and they don't turn the ball over, I think they win the game. If they don't, I think Cincinnati's just too much for them.
Over in the NFC, a hilarious Dallas Cowboys loss to the San Francisco 49ers, at least hilarious in the way that it ended on the final play of regulation as the Cowboys fall short against the San Francisco 49ers. Where do the Cowboys go from here in your mind, or have they bumped their heads on what their ceiling is when they're paying Dak Prescott this much money?
Yeah, I think it's for Dallas because when you really look at their situation, like Tony Pollard's a free agent now. Unfortunately, broke his leg, so it's unclear. At this point, how long is he out? How much does that affect his market? But he's a free agent. They have a litany of defensive players who are free agents. Corner Anthony Brown being one of them. Leighton Vander Esch is another one. They are going to lose Dalton Schultz, tight end, is free agent. They have no money. And look, everybody's going to point at that contract. It's fine. Ezekiel Elliott is in the midst of a 6-year, $90 million contract that they cannot cut him for like years on end for. So the Cowboys and Jerry signed that 2 years before they had to and are still paying for it. But I think they're just kind of screwed. Unless they just draft out of their minds. Look, Dak is the kind of guy, he's a good quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback. And he's got to be surrounded by elite talent. And if he's not, they're not going to win. And he missed 5 regular season games this year, and he led the NFL in picks. And against the Niners, he threw 2 picks. He's lucky he didn't throw 4 or 5. I mean, he had Greenlaw on the dead run. If Greenlaw caught the ball at the end of the game, that would have been the thing that sealed it. He misses Gallup on a ball deep down the field over Torres where he should have hit him. He's wide open. I think the problem for Dallas is Dak is what he is. He's probably about like the 12th best quarterback in the NFL. And they don't have the wherewithal, other than just drafting out of their minds the next couple of years, to build much more around.
And to build on that too, Matt, when it comes to the Cowboys, is McCarthy in trouble here? I mean, I know he won a playoff game this year. They had a good year, won a bunch of games in the regular season. I get that. But
right.
Like, this is 2 years in a row against the 49ers, who are good. There's no shame in a vacuum in losing to San Francisco. But that's 2 years in a row, short of the NFC Championship game, losing in the most hilariously stupid fashion possible. Like, is he at any risk here?
I don't think so. I never want to rule it out completely because Jerry Jones is Jerry Jones.
Yeah.
And anybody who claims they know exactly what Jerry's thinking, I mean, unless you got a direct line to him, I hesitate. The other part of it is, too, Sean Payton's out there. And I will tell you firsthand, Sean Payton and Jerry Jones are unbelievably close. So does that change his thinking? I don't know. I don't think so. If they had lost to Tampa, I would have been much more inclined to say, yeah, he's out the door. They won that game. They won convincingly. They went, and they did lose in ridiculous fashion. By the way, on that last play, like how many reps did they waste in practicing that play? Like, how much brain power went into that? And they're like, this is great. This is great. We can lateral the ball to him. And then they just immediately gave it up within 2 seconds of snapping football. I don't think he's going to get fired. I don't think he should get fired, for the record. I don't think he will. I don't think he should. But I think this Cowboys team is just kind of what it is. I don't see them all of a sudden just ascending without drafting, a couple of all-pro type players here in the next year or two.
Just a couple more questions for Matt Verderame, national NFL writer for Fansided.com. You can find him on Twitter at Matt Verderame, and you can find his tremendous work covering the NFL at Fansided.com as well. The other game from the NFC, it was on Saturday night. The Eagles just ran roughshod on the Giants. And look, it's a good year for the Giants, a year that they were not expecting to have in all likelihood, and they've got some decisions to make, but overall successful year from them. You learn anything new about the Eagles, or was that pretty much business as usual for that team on Saturday night?
I think the biggest thing I learned from Philadelphia is it looked like Hurts and Johnson were healthy enough. Whether they're 100% or not, I doubt it, but they looked like they were healthy enough. I'm not surprised. I went into that week thinking the Giants might cover because I thought they might be somewhat cautious in the way they played because of those injuries. I was wrong with the cover. I was right with the overall pick. I thought Philly would win the game, and they did, obviously very easily. The Giants, it's one of those things. Listen, you had a really good year. Nobody thought in a million years you'd make playoffs. Not only did you make playoffs, you won a road playoff game. You really have to feel good about the program moving forward. That's a free, much like Jacksonville, although Jacksonville, of course, played better. That was free money. Like, if you won that game, that's incredible. If you lose that game, so be it. Who cares? I think for the Eagles, no, I don't think I learned much, but they to me are the best team in the NFL. Like, when they really have it all going. The only question I have, and it's not going to be answered this week either, what does that defense look like when it goes against an elite quarterback? They have not. If you look at their schedule all year long, including the playoffs, they've not faced one top 10 quarterback the entire season outside of Trevor Lawrence, who was not playing well early in the year, and it was a monsoon. Okay. The next best quarterback they played was Jared Goff. And then you get into like Prescott and Cousins. And then Cousins was in a Monday night game, so that doesn't even count. And then it just falls off a cliff. And it's all these guys who just can't play. Like, if they play Burrow or Mahomes, and obviously if they get the Super Bowl to play one of them, what does that look like? Do they just get ripped up defensively? I don't know. But I think they're fantastic. And I think they've been undervalued all year long in Vegas. And I think they have the advantage over San Francisco in this game.
I believe, and Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong here before this final question, I believe that the Eagles-49ers game is going to be the first non-rematch of the playoffs.
I don't even know. I hadn't thought of that. Well, there's been so many divisional games.
Right.
Well, Dallas and San Francisco, they didn't play this year.
Oh, okay. All right. So there was one before. But it's crazy, though. We've had so many.
Yeah. Really, just doing it off the top of my head, I think the only games that were that game and the Bills-Bengals didn't play in the regular season because it got canceled, although they were supposed to.
Right. Okay. No, that's
so I
fair.
guess it depends. That's semantics. But it's going to be – look, it's going to be fascinating. Philadelphia and San Francisco, you got two I think, of the best defenses, maybe the best defenses in football going in that game. Philadelphia shared 68 sacks. Nobody else even had 56. Kansas City was second with 55. And then San Francisco – you're not going to find a better pair of linebackers, a team that's more physical, that does more things, with their single high look. So it's going to be a fascinating game. That game is going to be a very physical, intense football game. I can't wait to watch it.
So the last thing then, Matt, did we end up with the best 4 teams in the NFL playing for berths in the Super Bowl?
Yes, we did. I thought the Bills were right there, if not at the top of the list, until Miller got hurt. That changed everything for them. That and the fact that Allen just did not play well down the stretch. I mean, he really fell off. I said and wrote many times going into the playoffs, I thought the 2 best teams in the AFC were Kansas City and Cincinnati, and I didn't think it was close. I picked Cincinnati to beat Buffalo. I thought they'd beat them up. I thought, I had a lot of people asking this week for the Chiefs, who would you rather face? I thought the Chiefs would have done the same thing for the Bills. I really did. I thought the Chiefs would have lit them up in the game. I just don't think the Bills can cover right now with that pass rush. So, yeah, I think in the NFC side, no question. Those have been the 2 best teams since October. But in the AFC side, yeah, I think those are the 4 best teams overall, and I think both of the games are going to be great. I would be shocked if one of them gets totally blown out.
It should be an awesome championship game weekend. To look ahead to that, to look back on the divisional round as well, we are chatting with Matt Verderame of Fansided.com. Go find his great work at Fansided, including the always tremendous Stacking the Box column. You can find him on Twitter as well, at Matt Verderame. Matt, as always, man, we appreciate the time. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy championship weekend. Should be a fun one.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
That's Matt Verderame from Fansided.com. Always tremendous insight into all things NFL. We've got to take a break for the national and local news. 4 o'clock hour of 580 Sports Talk is coming up after this on 580 WIBW. Hey now, second hour of 580 Sports Talk coming your way on this Monday, January 23rd. I'm Brendan Dworzinski. That is Dan Lucero. Here with you until 6 o'clock today for 580 Sports Talk. Coming up at 6, by the by, we've got the 580 Preps High School Boys Basketball Coaches Club recapping all of the action from the boys tournament scene this weekend. We'll talk to all 8 city head coaches. That is right. All 8. The 3501 schools, Seaman, Hayden, Shawnee Heights, Washburn Rural, Care Paravel as well. All about the TIT, the Viking Invitational over at Shawnee Mission West, the January Jam at Valley Center, all the other tournaments going on around the area, including, as we mentioned, in the good, the bad, and the ugly. I had Highland Park winning the TIT as my good for the weekend. Really, the whole tournament was awesome. We had multiple overtime games. We had multiple game-winning buzzer beaters, a couple halftime buzzer beaters, quarter buzzer beaters as well. Incredible effort by Highland Park. Topeka West, after winning last year, finishes third this year. Both Hayden and Topeka High improved on their finishes from a year ago by 2 spots each. Hayden was 5th this year after being 7th last year. High was 6th this year after they were 8th a year ago. So great weekend overall for Topeka basketball. That's coming up at the top of the 6 o'clock hour right here on 580 WIBW, the 580 Preps High School Boys Basketball Coaches Club. This hour on 580 Sports Talk, we've got plenty of college basketball to get to. K-State with a big win over Texas Tech this weekend. KU with a big loss to TCU. We'll recap both of those games. We've also got What Is Wrong With You, and we've got our initial thoughts on Chiefs versus Bengals coming up in the AFC Championship game. By the way, Dan, you know what the spread is early on for this contest?
I do. I know it has, in the parlance of gambling, jumped the fence.
Chiefs started as a favorite, slim favorite. It has already flipped around to the Bengals being favored right now. That means a lot of money, and some wise guys said, yeah, give me the Bengals.
Lots of money coming in, and the public all over the Cincinnati Bengals, who are now presently, according to our friends at FanDuel, a 1-point favorite for Sunday. I will not be surprised if that goes back the other direction if Mahomes practices this week.
Mm-hmm.
If he's a DNP, if they just keep him off his feet all week, which would be totally reasonable for the Chiefs to do that and just not have him practice and roll him out there for Sunday, because Andy Reid said he expects that Mahomes will play, or that Mahomes expects that Mahomes is going to play on Sunday. And I have no reason to think that he won't.
Yep.
But if he doesn't practice all week, I think that's probably where the line will settle, somewhere around the Bengals being a 1 to 1.5 point road favorite. If Mahomes does practice, if he's feeling well enough to practice throughout the week, even if not a full participant, but if he's just on the participation report all 3 days, I wouldn't be surprised if that goes back to maybe even a pick 'em, or even the Chiefs being favored by a point.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that either. We'll see, though. Long way to go between now and Sunday. A lot to get to, a lot of drama around that situation. We'll talk all about it coming up this hour. We'd also love to get your commentary as well on whatever we are talking about. 785-272-9429 is the number for the Big O Tires text line. You can also hit us up on YouTube. Our channel is Sports on 580 WIBW. Comment section is wide open. Dan, we would like some clarification on your hat, by the way.
We have a curiosity. This is the Quebec Nordiques, formerly of the National Hockey League. Of course, in 1995, the Nordiques moved to the city of Denver, Colorado, and became the Colorado Avalanche. So, yes, Vance, you are correct in a sense. This is a throwback Avalanche hat. This is the Quebec Nordiques, the forefathers of my beloved Colorado Avalanche and reigning Stanley Cup champions.
People do forget that. So YouTube comment section is wide open. Big O Tires text line is wide open to you as well. Let's get into it, though, with the college basketball from the weekend. You want to start with K-State, or do you want to start with KU?
Let's talk about the number 5 team in the country.
Let's do it. AP poll is out this week. K-State's number 5. KU is number 9. So 2 teams in the state, both top 10. That is very cool. K-State beats Texas Tech, and that's a tough matchup. Texas Tech is the scrappiest, toughest, 0-win conference team in the country, I think is fair to say. They just can't get out of their own way. They are really struggling. They had a lead. They were up by 8 over Kansas State in the second half.
Yeah.
And then Kansas State just flipped it into another gear, ratcheted it up, and did what they've been doing to teams all season long. And now you've got a spot where K-State is deservedly in the top 5. If you ask me right now who is the hottest college basketball team in the country, I would tell you it is a two-way battle between Kansas State and Alabama. Alabama should be the number 1 team in the country, by the way, this week. They deserve to be the number 1 team this week. I didn't even see who it was.
Purdue.
It is Purdue.
Purdue's 1, Alabama's 2.
Yeah,
Houston dropped to 3. I forget who number 4 is. Maybe Arizona. And 5 is K-State.
Alabama should be number 1. I'm, in fact, pretty convinced Alabama should be number 1. Anyway, beside the point, the fact that K-State was able to come back and not
Tennessee's number 4, sorry.
That's fine. Either way, team I don't like. The fact that K-State was able to come back and turn it on to that degree, go on a crazy run, win by as much as they did. I mean, what's the next superlative? What's the next adjective you use to describe what this team is doing right now? Because they're playing like the best team in the country right now. They really are.
So they felt in pretty firm control of the game in the first half, and then Texas Tech went on a 14-2 run and led by 5 at the half, and they built that lead out to 8. And they asked Jerome Tang, because K-State called a timeout. They're down 8. And Jerome Tang was asked about that in the postgame. Like, what was the thought process in that timeout, being down and being able to rally down from that? And he says, well, he just told him in the timeout, hey, look, we're going to score here, and then it will be a 2-possession game, and there's all kinds of time left. Just keep your cool, keep your heads about you, and have the belief that, hey, we're going to go out of this timeout, we're going to get a bucket, and we're going to get it to 6, and then we're going to get it to 4 or 3, and then we're going to get it down to a 1-possession game. Just the simplicity of that. There's beauty in that simplicity because you don't build it up to make it hard work. You just do it little by little. How do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. More and more, I grow impressed, like already blown away by Jerome Tang as a figurehead, as a program spokesperson, as a university spokesperson, as somebody who has rallied and inspired the fans and the students and his players. I'm impressed by Jerome Tang as a recruiter. I'm impressed by the total Jerome Tang package outside of the 40 minutes that Kansas State plays on a night in, night out basis in the Big 12. I am growing to be more and more impressed with Jerome Tang as a game coach. And I think that's important because the Big 12 has some of the best game coaches in the country, including Bill Self, who I think is the best 40-minute game coach, X-O's guy in the country. I think Scott Drew has shown over time that he has become one of those guys. I don't think he was always one of those guys, but I think he's become one of those guys. And I think that there are other coaches in this conference that do a really good job, X's and O's, that their teams have identities. TJ Otzelberger's Iowa State has an identity. Mike Boynton's Oklahoma State has an identity. All of that stuff is really, really important. But I am so impressed by how Kansas State keeps its cool and how they are able to execute the things that they need to execute and overcome the things that maybe are weaknesses for them. Like K-State's not a great, they're not a big team, right? They've got some height, but big man and tall man are two different animals, right? Like Naquan Tomlin is tall.
Eddie Lampkin is a big man.
Yes, Eddie Lampkin is big. Fardaws Amack is big. Daniel Bacho is big. Kevin O'Banner is big. Naquan Tomlin and David Gasson on one wheel especially, they're tall. So it's different, right? So this matchup was a tough one for Kansas State because Texas Tech had the sort of size that could push Kansas State around underneath, could make it hard on the glass, kind of like the Oklahoma State game, I thought, in a lot of ways. And how did Kansas State overcome that? Marquise Noel gets 8 rebounds. Marquise Noel, smallest guy on the floor, 8 boards, a season high for him, and 23 points on 12 shots. Like, just another terrific game for him. If you were worried about him coming out of the KU game, boy, if teams maybe found the blueprint for slowing down Marquise Noel, he's back on track. Keontae Johnson, again, kind of a slow start for him, similar to the KU game where his offense started a bit slow, really also similar to the Oklahoma State game where teams have been physical with Keontae and he hasn't quite finished around the basket as effectively. When his jump shot has gotten going, that has gotten the rest of his game going. He hit a crucial three deep in the shot clock, deep on the floor, a wing three that I think broke a tie at the time. I want to say it made it 64-61, but it was a big shot and helped Kansas State to take the lead. And I do not believe they trailed from that point forward. But it's about making up for what you aren't, or maybe what you don't have, with what you do have. And what this team has, they got a lot of veterans, guys who played a lot of college basketball. They've got a tremendous amount of mental toughness and a tremendous amount of confidence. And those things start from the very top. They start with the head coach, Jerome Tang. So they do. They just impress me in a different way more and more every time I watch them play. And another really pleasant development for Kansas State right now, and it kind of stands in stark contrast to the other Sunflower State team we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. K-State got 16 bench points on Saturday, 12 of them coming from Ish Massoud, who, again, was so deep in the doghouse that Jerome Tang could barely talk about him after the Nebraska game where he was healthy for the Wildcat Classic in Kansas City against Nebraska. He was healthy for that game, but he didn't play. And he got asked a question about him, and I don't remember the exact answer, but the disgust on Jerome Tang's face was obvious. And said, like, he's got to figure it out, basically. Like, you could tell. The Ish Massoud in the doghouse. Right now, where are they without Ish Massoud? 12 big points off the bench on Saturday. He's got, the game-winning shot at Baylor. He is giving them whatever they need. 3-point shooting, he's added to that. Interior defense, even though he's not big man either. He's given them that. Rebounding, effort plays, hustle plays on the defensive end. Just there's total buy-in from this basketball team right now. And when you have a veteran savvy team and that level of buy-in and this level of confidence, you can have a really special season. That's what Kansas State's in the midst of right now.
Confidence is a hell of a thing. They've got it right now. They've got as much of it as anybody in the country, right? That's what they're playing with. And I think it probably to them feels a degree, not house money in the sense that, we can win or lose and we've gotten to this point, that's good enough. But just in the sense that, like, who's going to stop us? We feel great. We can beat anybody. We feel like we can beat anybody. We can go out and be free and be loose. We've beaten Kansas. We've beaten Baylor. We've beaten Texas. Okay, the 3 best programs in the league, certainly the 2 best programs in the league over the last half decade at this point. Why can't we go beat anyone else? We can beat them at home. We can beat them on the road. That's the kind of confidence K-State's playing with.
As Michael Beasley would say, we'll beat them at home. We'll beat them on the road. We'll beat them in Africa.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they're playing right now. And, I mean, all the credit goes to the players for playing the game, obviously. But you mentioned it at the top of the show. Like, fans were chanting KSU along with Sandstorm.
During Sandstorm.
Another chant that they have preferred to chant for quite some time now. Like, it's working. The method to his madness is working. It is bearing fruit at this point.
You want to buy into him. Yeah. Like you want to get behind Jerome Tang. He's that kind of personality, and you can see that from his players, and you can see that from the fans and the culture that this program is starting to be about. A couple texts from the Big O Tires text line here from the 316. Big 12-ish is amazing. Hustle is the name of his game now. That's what they were calling him in the postgame, his teammates. They've taken to calling him Big 12-ish since he's really stepped up his performance in Big 12 play.
All right. We're veering a little too close to playoff Damian here. We're veering a little too far in that direction.
I love that, though, because that's
well, they've got the confidence in him.
Yeah, and
I respect it.
That's your 7th man. Like, with Desi Stills is your 6th man. That's your 7th guy. You could even argue he's your 8th guy because David Gasson really hasn't played much lately. He played 4 minutes against Texas Tech. They're going to ease him back into the mix. But yeah, for him to be such a contributor that his teammates have given him a nickname like this, like that, again, that's culture.
Yeah.
These guys love playing together and they love playing with each other. And it just, you can tell it jumps off the screen when you watch them on television. It jumps off the page when you read the quotes or out of the video when you watch them talk about each other in the postgame. It's really, really powerful stuff. Also, a text from the 402 on the Big O Tires text line. Does K-State deserve to be a number 1 seed? They are in that conversation. I know Jerry Palm at CBS had them as a 1 seed before they beat before their win over Texas Tech on Saturday. He had already moved them up to the 1 line. Yeah, they're going to be in that discussion 100%.
As they should be. They belong there. You're in that kind of position in the best conference in America. Yes, you deserve to be in that conversation, and you should be there. There's no doubt about it. Let's get to there's not really a whole lot that needs to be added about KU. Like, KU just got beaten this week. I mean, they got beaten badly. It was a very simple game, right? Like,
when you don't play...
Jalen Wilson was amazing, and that's it. You had nothing else. You had Jalen Wilson going nuts on offense, and the way Bill Self put it was Wilson on offense, DeJuan Harris played well defensively, and you got nothing else from anybody in the game. And yeah, that's effectively true. I mean, you could box score watch for that game. Not every game you can box score watch for, like K-State versus Texas Tech. I think to tell the story of that game, you need to do more than just look at, okay, here's a chart with some scores and some stats. The KU game, now you can box score watch, and that'll tell you pretty much how the game went. In the first half, TCU could not miss. They shot 54% for the game. Jalen Wilson was awesome, and you got 10 empty calorie points from Kevin McCullough. Now, it's more than just empty calories because McCullough had to see the ball go in the basket. He needed that badly, but Grady Dick was 3 of 13 from the floor, and one of the threes he did make, of the 8 he attempted, 6 he missed, he made 2. One of them, it was a 20-point game, essentially. Game was over at that point. Didn't mean anything. DeJuan Harris has gone scoreless 2 games in a row. And we know he affects the game in other ways. You don't need him to score. But in a game where you don't get anything from KJ Adams because he was in foul trouble and had a bad matchup in which Grady Dick's not scoring, then you do need him to score points because you can't rely on your bench at all. And a couple things that stood out post-game. Self said, well, it's not about offense, it's about guarding, and we've got to be able to guard better because guarding better is going to turn into better opportunities offensively, and specifically referring to transition, yeah, that's obviously the case, and KU did not guard nearly well enough. By the same token, KU had looks and couldn't make them, and you're not going to go very far with Grady Dick going 3 of 16, I believe it is, from 3 over the last 2 games.
And I'm not worried about him. He's getting good looks. They're just not going down. Like, the iron is unkind to Grady Dick right now. It happens, particularly to freshmen. Sometimes you get in a funk.
Yeah.
And he's in a funk. He's in a shooting slump. And he'll pull out of it. He's too good a shooter not to. Like, that's not the guy I'm worried about long term. DeJuan Harris, maybe that early stretch in Big 12 play where he was making all of his 3-pointers, maybe that was fool's gold a little bit. They do need him to score a little bit more. They probably need McCullough to be more confident from the perimeter. He had a couple of good open looks that he turned down. And
he's terrified right now.
Yeah, if you're a senior, that can't be you. You've got to be willing to take that shot because your teammates want you to take that shot.
And the buckets he got 4 early points in transition, and I thought this is great from McCullough. He needed to see the ball go in. KU had a stretch in this game. They went 5 for 5 from the field, 5 straight makes. They then made one of their next 9 shots, and it just snowballed from there. The turning point of the game, and Self said this, and I agree with him, KU got the game down to 10 at halftime. You and I talked about this yesterday, in fact. We were working the 94.5 Country Bridal Fair, and we were talking about the game. And when KU got it down to 10, felt like they could win that game.
I thought they would win that game.
I mean, that was a classic. All right, you played awfully, still just 10 points. It was as many as 22.
TCU made a ton of threes in the first half. Water's going to find its level.
And then TCU scored the first 6 points after halftime. And you just thought, oh.
Yeah.
All that momentum zapped in an instant. And again, they couldn't score. Defense was bad. Eddie Lampkin looked like he was at 10% health on his ankle. And he at one point deked KJ Adams out of his shoes. And I thought, okay, that's probably the game. Because KJ's playing his worst game of the season. Harris can't score. Dick is still struggling to shoot. Jalen Wilson's going crazy, but you're willing to let Jalen Wilson go crazy if you're already up by 15 points. That's fine. You don't care about that at that point. Back-to-back 30-point games for Jalen Wilson. And KU went 0-2 in those games. Tells you that you need something else. And right now, you can't get that off the bench.
No.
You don't have, Bobby Pettiford's not a scorer off the bench. Joseph Yesufu right now is not a scorer off the bench.
He's
None
not
of your young
player off the bench.
No, he's really not. Neither of your bigs. MJ Rice isn't that guy right now. He's just getting back potentially into the rotation. You don't have, give me a bench guy from the recent past. You don't have Remy Martin coming off the bench.
No.
Right? Nothing close to that. You don't even have from the mid 2010s. You don't have Brandon Green coming off the bench, who was a doofus, but you could count on to shoot the three. If he was touching the ball, he was shooting the three. And you could count on him for 2 or 3 makes a game.
You know who they'd love to have right now? An Ish Masood.
Yeah. Just someone who could go get you a bucket. They don't have that.
Or make a three. Like make a spot up 3-pointer if all the other offensive options are guarded. Like Jalen Coleman lands. Like somebody.
Free money.
Yeah, somebody. Isaiah Moss. Somebody along those lines.
Oh, I would kill for Isaiah Moss right now. Love that dude. In
the long haul, though, I mean, Saturday's game doesn't tell you much about Kansas other than this is what can happen to them when they play bad against a good team. It's what can happen to anybody when you don't play well against a good team.
Mm-hmm.
And TCU is really freaking good. There's a reason they're in the top 15 in the country. They're really excellent. And they are a team that thrives on confidence, and you could see their confidence grow as that game went on, as they took a 22-point first half lead at Allen Fieldhouse. You could tell that they felt like they could have beaten the 2016 Golden State Warriors that day. And sometimes just get got. And in this conference, it happens. And the tricky part for KU is they don't lose back-to-back games very often.
Mm-hmm.
And they especially don't lose back-to-back games with one of them being at home. I think the last time that happened, where they lost back-to-back league games and one of them was at home, was 2013. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. I got to go look that up.
So they are in an interesting spot tonight. We'll talk more about this a little bit later on in the show, but they are in a very interesting spot tonight against a Baylor team where they go in as underdogs to the Farrell Center, which is always rocking when KU comes to town. But if there is a trend that bears watching here, when Kansas is an underdog against Baylor all time, when it's Bill Self versus Scott Drew, KU's 5-2. They find ways to win these games. And when KU is in desperation mode, which they kind of, I don't know if they are. I don't think that's quite right to put it that way tonight, but you don't want to lose 3 in a row.
No. Oh, God, no. That puts you in a very, very uncomfortable spot you do not want to be in.
You start losing your margin for error, even if it ends up being 5 losses wins this conference. And I still think that's a possibility that the winner of this league at the end is 13-5, 14-4.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's 14-4, you're out of margin for error, essentially, if you go to Waco and you get got.
You are also correct. I just pulled it up. 2012, 2013, KU won the league. Of course they did. That time of,
yeah,
that was
in that time frame. Yeah.
They tied with K-State actually for the league title that year.
Mm-hmm.
KU had a stretch where they lost at home to Oklahoma State, lost at TCU, and then lost at Oklahoma in consecutive games.
That was the Topeka YMCA.
I believe you were correct about that.
I believe.
At the down in Fort Worth. Yeah, I believe you're correct about that. I think KU wins tonight, but we'll preview that game coming up a little bit later on in the show. Right now, we need to take a break, and we've got What Is Wrong With You coming up after this timeout right here on 580 Sports Talk.
Hell.
Time for What Is Wrong With You here on 580 Sports Talk on this Monday afternoon. Brendan and Dan here with you. This is, and I got to make sure I'm correct here. Yeah, this is our final week of What Is Wrong With You stories for the month. We will have our semifinals a week from today for January, and our January championship coming up a week from tomorrow. So we'll get a good weekly winner in here to send us into the tournament on a high note. Dan, I will let you go first, but I also should advise everyone there is a very clear and obvious theme to our stories today. Not intentionally, but we ended up with a theme.
Not done intentionally, I can assure you. As I put it to Brendan off the air earlier, this might not be the number one What Is Wrong With You day of all time, but it might be the number two. With that said, let's go to Tukwila, Washington, where on Monday night, a thief broke into the administrative office at the Tukwila Community Center and stole an iPad, laptop, and charging cable, and left behind some DNA evidence in the sink. What kind of DNA evidence? Well, police have nicknamed the suspect the Phantom Pooper, so I'm guessing it wasn't blood.
Nope.
The suspect also left behind digital evidence when they merged the stolen laptop's Apple account to their own personal account. So the police knew exactly who this person was. The police report says, needless to say, we do not see a lengthy or prosperous criminal career in the field of hacking for the suspect. Said suspect is encouraged to wash his hands with soap, then come down to our station to return the stolen items and discuss his options to save everyone some time.
This guy should be in jail just to save him from himself. Come on, you can't merge your Apple account with the stolen laptop. You got to delete everything first or just sell it.
Yeah, like,
come on, man.
like, not smart at all. But clearly, this was a crime, something very personal. Like, you don't leave that behind somewhere.
No,
particularly in the sink. Like, you want to send a message.
Very clearly. Maybe he's got beef with police. Like the guy
center.
In Japan.
It's the community center.
Oh, it's not the community center. It's not,
not the police station.
Not the police station. That's true.
The administrative office at the Tukwila Community Center. Like, what did they ever do to you?
Maybe he's got beef with them for some
reason. That you felt like you had to do to them.
They kicked him out of the gym while he was playing basketball. They told him he stunk and had to get off the court.
And he said, I stink, huh?
Yeah. Look, the poop is bad. It's very bad. Especially to leave it in the sink. But you can't be merging your Apple stuff, man. That stuff is so easily traceable. That brings us to my story today, which is going to take us to Fort Myers, Florida, where police are still searching for a pooping perpetrator they caught on camera breaking into a Joe's Crab Shack. This story came up in the office today, and it led to about an hour-long conversation between the two of us, Fulton and Britt, about like family fast casual chain restaurants. Surveillance video shows a man squeeze through a small broken window to get into the Joe's Crab Shack. This happened at 2:30 a.m. this past week. Police alleged that the suspect stole several items, including not an iPad, not a laptop, not a charging cable, alcohol, and a hat.
Wow, you really swear he me.
And then he defecated on the floor before leaving.
No longer swears he me.
Fort Myers police are asking anyone who recognizes the man to contact them or submit an anonymous tip to the Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers. And, how much they recognize him? They caught this dude in 4K.
Oh, yeah.
This is, like, at bare minimum, 720p. Man, security cameras are getting high tech, man.
They are, man. Even Joe's Crab Shack's got the 8K.
I mentioned this earlier. Joe's Crab Shack is the last restaurant I ever went to that had designated smoking and non-smoking sections. Like, I have vivid memory. I was like almost a teenager at this point in Illinois, and I remember them having a big thing like, oh yeah, for another month you can smoke in the restaurant. So if you want to do it, go over there. And that's Joe's Crab Shack for you.
I remember Joe's Crab Shack for being the most obnoxiously loud restaurant I've ever been in my life. I went with my family. I'm probably like 10 or 11 years old, and it was just oppressively loud.
Just a wall of noise.
You get the tin walls, you know,
yeah.
It's a Crab Shack, right? And just everything rings off the tin, and they're playing music like at an ear-splitting volume. And I'm like, 10 or 11, so this would have put it mid-90s.
Mhm.
So you're sitting there trying to eat your king crab or whatever, and it's just the gin blossoms at volume 38 out of 40 rattling these tin walls.
I will follow you down into hell through this wall of noise.
I like Collective Soul's shine. Does it need to be that loud? No, it does not.
So, in conclusion, this gentleman broke into a Joe's Crab Shack at 2:30, was caught very clearly on security footage, stole a hat, some hard alcohol, and then pooped on the floor and left.
Again.
He, by the way, was wearing the hat as he rummaged around in the Joe's Crab Shack.
Yeah, why steal a hat if you're not going to wear it? Again, why? That feels personal. It feels like you're sending a message when you do something like that, when you leave something like that behind for someone to find the next day.
I don't know, man. I've never thought about weaponizing fecal matter like that before.
A lot of fiber in the diet, I would imagine.
Binging Metamucil before going on a rampage. Who wins today?
That's tough. I got to go, though. I got to go with the guy who stole the laptop and then merged it with his own personal Apple account.
I'm with you. That's just so, like, if you know how to do that, you're clearly with it enough to know that stuff can be traced.
Mhm.
Like every Apple product, I've got an iPhone. Everything can be traced with the Find My iPhone, Find My computer stuff now.
Yeah.
Come on, man. That's just dumb as hell.
You make it really, really easy on the police department. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, they had to be sweating it. Well, we have some DNA evidence. Does anybody really want to touch that? No. Nah, wish we had any other way to track this guy. What's that? We do? Perfect. Case closed. Take him away, boys.
You just gave them all of his information. That's unbelievable. Yeah, that wins for me. That the Phantom Pooper. Can we go with that?
Yeah, we can go with the Phantom Pooper.
That is our winner today in the number 2 edition of What Is Wrong With You. It'll advance onto tomorrow's show. Right now, we've got to take a timeout. We'll talk some Chiefs and Bengals next here on 580 Sports Talk.
Make your dream a reality.
Back on 580 Sports Talk, Brendan and Dan here with you. I have to adjust my camera for the YouTube stream. It fell down because I pulled on the cord. Oh, did it again. That was trying to illustrate it that time, and I freaking pulled on it. Brendan and Dan here with you on 580 Sports Talk. We're here with you until 6 o'clock today. Appreciate you joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on the Sports Voice of Kansas, or listening online around the world at 580wibw.com. We got a comment here on YouTube from Casey. Appreciate you chiming in on the show, Casey. Asks, if Patrick Mahomes plays, will he be 100%? And what do you guys think the final score will be, since the last 3 in a row have been won by the Bengals? Too early for me to answer that question, but that does bring us to what we wanted to discuss here in this segment. Too early for me to make a prediction. I need to get a little bit more. I don't know if we'll get much more on Mahomes' injury status. I kind of doubt it. I'm going to need to wait until Friday at about 3:25 when we normally make our predictions for me to feel comfortable with anything.
Yeah, I don't want to make a shoot from the hip prediction on this one, but I will say this. Again, I think it bears mentioning and it bears repeating that, yes, the Chiefs have lost 3 in a row to Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. And they have lost those 3 games by 3 points on a field goal at the end of regulation, by 3 points on a field goal in overtime, and by 3 points. So the results are 3 wins for the Bengals and no wins for the Chiefs. But you're 1 bounce or 1 break in any of those games from them having been Chiefs victories. So it's not as lopsided as the 3 wins in a row would make it feel. And that's what makes this so fascinating going in is, yes, the Bengals have had the Chiefs number, but they have not dominated. They've just won. They've made 1 more play, or the Chiefs have made 1 fewer play. They've gotten the break on the turnover. They've gotten the first down on the penalty. That was, the regular season meeting at the end of last season. The Bengals got a bunch of first downs on Chiefs defensive penalties, the kind of stuff that frankly doesn't get called in the playoffs. And then in the playoff game, if they can score a touchdown on 1st and goal from the 5, if they just take the points, take the profit at the end of the first half, something I'm sure they would have done differently if they could do it all over again instead of run the play that doesn't work, or they run a better play and they score a touchdown. It's 28-10 at halftime. Even just doing that differently. And then in the regular season meeting this year, Travis Kelce doesn't fumble at midfield midway through the 4th quarter. The Chiefs are up 24-20 and they're driving, and they had moved the ball really well on that Bengal defense all game. They had a chance to at least push the lead out to, the Chiefs get the ball to midfield with a fresh set of downs. You like their odds to at least get a field goal out of the possession. For sure. So it's one thing. It's one thing in all 3 games that has either eluded the Chiefs or it is a play that the Bengals have made, and that has been the difference. So the question is, can the Chiefs be the team that makes that play? That's going to be the ultimate question when they tee it up on Sunday. But the public perception of this game, and it's reflected in the fact that the point spread has gone from what was a consensus Chiefs -3 to a consensus Bengals -1 in less than 24 hours. The public perception of this game is that the Bengals should win. And I'm here to tell you that the reason for that is the Bengals have been the best team in the AFC since October, potentially, at least the most consistent. And they smoked the Buffalo Bills.
Yes, they did.
They went on the road and they beat them down. It was not close. It was not as close as that final score would have indicated. And they did it in all 3 phases. They were impressive in all 3 phases. And they, I think, deserve to be favored. I was a little surprised the Chiefs were the initial favorites, to be quite honest with you.
I think the Bengals' last touchdown drive was maybe one of the best touchdown drives we have seen in the entire NFL this season. They get the ball, they matriculated it down the field, they picked up 5 first downs. Their offensive line was allowing Joe Burrow to have all day to throw the ball. They ate up a ton of clock, and they did the Mitch Holthus. They put the hammer down. That was one of the most decisive drives we have seen all year long. Now, granted, the Bills at that point, and pretty much by the end of that drive, I don't want to say they quit, but it was clear that it was over. Like, it wasn't going to happen for the Bills in that game.
Their tanks were on E.
I don't think the Chiefs will ever get to that point, and you feel good coming off of 2 consecutive games in which the defense has played really well. And I know there was a break in there in the middle, but the defense was really good against a good Jacksonville team. I think it's fair that by the end of the year, by that game on Saturday, you could say the Jaguars are a good team.
Yeah.
I think for most of the year it was, it's,
somebody's got to win that division.
They were the skinniest kid at fat camp, right? Like, that's a very inappropriate thing to say in 2023 probably, but I mean, that's the analogy. Is that, it's the AFC South. Who cares? Any team that wins. No, I mean, that was a good football team that was playing really well. And in week 18, the defense was awesome against the Raiders. And sure, you could argue, well, the Raiders had a backup quarterback. Well, the Raiders did this and X, Y, and Z. And Josh McDaniels is a doofus. Okay, sure. The Chiefs still were great defensively. All you can do is play the team that's in front of you. You don't get to control that. Chiefs made it happen. They've looked good defensively. I don't think they're going to roll over like the Bills sort of felt like they were doing at the end of that game, specifically in the second half against the Bengals. But the fact that, and you brought this up, it's been one more play or maybe just 2 more plays than the Chiefs have made in these last 3 meetings between the 2 teams. Why is that? And that's, I think, the crux of what is going to inform my final prediction for this game. Why is it that the Bengals have been able to make one more play or one more better decision or execute in one situation better in each of the last 3 matchups? One time, okay, it's luck. 2, they're on a heater. 3 times, all right, that's a trend at this point.
It starts to be who you are. And I think that's what the Bengals have been, and they've been that throughout this season, I think, is they have been the team that when it gets down to it, they make the play. They force the turnover. They get the first down. They make the play they have to make to go win the football game. And they are tremendously confident on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. Again, you could tell by just how they physically dominated the Bills. Big talking point, I think, coming out of what the Bengals did on Sunday afternoon was how well they ran the ball and doing it with 3 backup offensive linemen in the starting lineup. There's going to be a lot made of that because probably all 3 of those guys are going to play on Sunday. I'm not sure if they're going to get Alex Kappa or Jonah Williams back. They're definitely not getting La'el Collins back. So it could be 3 backup offensive linemen. And you watch that performance against the Bills and the way they ran the ball, and you say, oh my gosh, they look like the Washington offensive lines of the 80s. They look like the Hogs. They look like the Cowboys offensive line of the early 90s. They were physically, they bullied teams. The factor that I think is important to remember from that game was that it snowed, and snow games are great for offensive linemen.
Yes,
because they know where they're going. And when 300 pounds, 350 pounds knows where it's going before you know where you're going as the defensive player, that is a significant advantage to the offensive line. So I think the conditions were there for their offensive line to be a plus factor in the running game and be a non-factor at least in the negative way that we were maybe concerned about, that some were concerned about in the passing game. That changes a little bit if it doesn't snow at Arrowhead Stadium on Sunday.
That is true.
But what doesn't change is the Bengals ran the ball effectively against the Chiefs in the first meeting and did a lot of it up the middle. And I can tell you this, Nick Bolton is going to have to play a better football game against the Bengals than he did against the Jaguars. There were a lot of plays, and I am very amateur when it comes to like eating tape, like grinding tape or like watching a replay and picking up, okay, this is what happened here. But even I can see Nick Bolton's in the wrong gap a lot. Nick Bolton was making the wrong choice or the wrong read or however you want to put it. But when there were plays to be made in the running game against the Jaguars, Nick Bolton wasn't there to make them. He is going to have to be much, much better, maybe a little bit more aggressive. And the rest of the linebackers are going to have to do the same if they want to limit the running game. Because if you can keep Joe Burrow in 3rd and long, then you have a chance for your pass rush to get after him with those backup offensive linemen. And that's going to be the name of the game, as Matt Verderame told us in hour number 1. If the Chiefs can get pressure with 4 linemen, they're going to have a really good chance to win this game.
In week 13, Samaje Perine had 106 rushing yards against you. Joe Mixon didn't play in that game. He had a concussion. Samaje Perine was the feature back. He had 106 rushing yards. Do you know how many rushing yards for the season Samaje Perine had?
300 something?
394. He had 27% of his year's rushing yards in one game against the Chiefs. And not because, he only played in 8 games. No, he played every single game this year. He had more games with single-digit rushing yards than he had games with 30 or more rushing yards. And he put up over 100 against the Chiefs back in week 13. And their better running back is going to be in this game. Now, that being said, if the Chiefs are able to get past that makeshift offensive line that the Bengals are putting out there, you're probably not going to see a lot of Joe Mixon. You know why? You know what Joe Mixon's not good at?
Pass blocking.
Yeah, it is gross and has always been gross. He's a decent pass catcher. He is a good running back. I don't think he's great at anything. He's just pretty solid at everything except pass blocking. He is bad at pass blocking. Samaje Perine in the NFL. Not as good as his record-breaking game against KU when he was in college would lead you to believe as a running back in the NFL. But as a pass blocker, above average. He's pretty good. He is their pass blocking back. That's why a lot of times over the last 2 years, you may have seen Bengals fans on social media or even people on TV say, well, what are you doing with Samaje Perine in there? Because he can block, because he can protect, he can pick up blitzes, he can pick up rushers off the edge, he can chip. Mixon can't do those kinds of things. At least he can't do them well. So that's another thing you're going to have to account for in this game if you're the Bengals. You might have to rely more on Samaje Perine if you get in situations where you're in 2nd and long, 3rd and long, if you're getting behind schedule, behind the chains, so to speak. There are so many fascinating elements of this game. Again, the quarterback setup. Mahomes might have to throw quickly because he can't extend plays to get those long developing vertical plays working because he's on a bum ankle. Burrow might have to get rid of the ball quickly because he's playing behind 3 backups on his offensive line. Although, we should say, shout out Hakeem Adeniji. He played really well this weekend. The whole offensive line played really well. Bills couldn't do anything up front. They got dominated. If the Chiefs get dominated like that, the Bengals are going to play for another Super Bowl. But if they can match the Bengals' physicality with what they showed against the Jaguars, go back to what Matt Verderame said, right? Then the Chiefs should be able to win this game. I think it's a fascinating matchup. Obviously, we're going to talk about it plenty before we get to the game coming up on Sunday. We're going to talk all about divisional weekend around the NFL playoffs coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. We've also got headlines and a preview of Big Monday. It's all coming up on 580 Sports Talk. now, 1 hour to go on 580 Sports Talk. Brendan Dworzinski and Dan Lucero here with you today. Appreciate you for spending some of your afternoon hours with us. If you've missed any of the show, head to our website, 580wibw.com. The podcast tab is right in the middle of the page. Just hover over that. A menu will pop up. Click on 580 Sports Talk, and boom, that's where you'll find the hour-by-hour breakdown of the show. Also, you can go back to YouTube. It's not just live and, felt the cough coming from the very beginning of that sentence. It's not just live. It doesn't disappear. You can go back and watch anytime. If you missed any part of the show, if you want to watch anything in particular, if you want to rewind just a few minutes, you can do so on YouTube. Again, our channel is Sports on 580 WIBW. You can also chime in the comment section with any thoughts that you've got on anything we are talking about today. And you can hit us up on the Big O Tires text line. As always, you know the drill. 785-272-9429 is our text line number. Coming up this hour, we will preview Big Monday, KU versus Baylor. KU is an underdog. Smells like I'm taking Bill Self in that one. Generally has been the smart plan. We will also get to our recap of everything else that went on around the divisional round in the NFL. A lot of drama, even if a bunch of the games, handful of games anyway, were not super close. Looking at you, Eagles game, and looking at you, Bengals game. But all that's coming up this hour. First things first, though, let's get to our 580 Sports Talk headlines brought to you by Blue Dot of Kansas. You can go visit them online at bluedotkansas.com. First headline for me from One Arrowhead Drive today. The Chiefs are acting as if Patrick Mahomes is going to be just fine to go. Andy Reid said today, quote, "He's worked hard in treatment and is doing okay. He mentioned it to you that he's going to play. That's his mindset. And then we'll just take it day by day and see how he does." Andy Reid being coy about injury news? I can't believe it.
An NFL head coach not being entirely forthright about an injury?
Coaches can't be quite as coy about it because they are mandated to put out an injury report and they get fined and docked draft picks if they don't follow it properly.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't get quite to Jim Harbaugh levels of just starting quarterback. What are you talking about? We're gonna play 11 offensive linemen. I don't even know what a quarterback is, and then running out the guy everyone knew was going to start at quarterback in week 1.
And it's not like the NHL where there are only two kinds of injuries in the league: upper body injuries and lower body injuries. What's an upper body injury? That could be a broken arm. That could be a bruised chest. That could be a concussion. That could be a broken nose. It could be any of those things. And the timetable for return, none of your damn business.
Is there a rule about what constitutes upper body? Or can they say, wait, I thought he hurt his thigh. Well, it's above his knee. Lower body below the knee.
You might be right.
I don't know.
Right about that.
I would not be surprised. I'm sure coaches wish they could do that. Just make things up. They probably do, to be honest with you. I mean, shoot, Tom Brady was probable on the Patriots practice report for like 6 years. Like, yeah, probably going to put up 300 yards and win the game. Yes, we know Patriots. But it does seem as though Mahomes is going to be okay. He said after the game, "I feel better than I thought I would." You got this quote from Patrick Mahomes. Think it's probably safe to bet he's not going to be 100%. That's clear. Again, he couldn't walk normally on Saturday, but I think it's pretty obvious he is going to be playing. He is going to be starting. And unless it gets worse, we will not be seeing Chad Henne this weekend.
Now, Reid did note today that he does not believe that the injury Mahomes is currently dealing with is as significant as the ankle sprain he suffered to his left ankle in the regular season opener in 2019, which you may recall was also against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mahomes played on that, didn't miss any time, threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns the very next week against the Raiders. But that was his left ankle, and Patrick Mahomes is a right-handed quarterback, which means he's dealing with an injury to his plant leg and not his other leg. So it's not exactly apples and oranges, even if it is, I would suppose, a good sign that it's not as severe as a previous injury. And I thought the fact, again, could be gamesmanship. I could be a sucker here. But the fact that Mahomes wasn't in a walking boot on his way out of Arrowhead Stadium or on his way to talk to reporters on Saturday evening was a good thing. If they thought that would help, they would have put him in the boot and wouldn't have cared. Wouldn't have cared about the optics of it. So, like, you don't have time to worry about optics when you're trying to get a guy healthy to win an AFC championship. So the fact that they looked at that and looked at his injury and said, yeah, you don't need a boot. Boot's not going to help you. That's either good or bad, I guess.
Yeah.
I would lean good, but again, could be gamesmanship.
We'll see. I would expect he will be out there and will take every snap of the game on Sunday. That's just my hunch, though.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong hunch for me. They probably won't run a lot of speed option with him like they did on the first play on Saturday.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we're going to see Patrick Mahomes on Sunday. Other injury notes from divisional playoff weekend as we continue our Blue Dot of Kansas headlines. One for a team that's still going. Christian McCaffrey, running back for the San Francisco 49ers, is dealing with a calf contusion. That kept him out for a good chunk of the second half, really limited him as he finished with just 36 yards rushing in the 49ers victory over the Dallas Cowboys. Elijah Mitchell got the second half snaps and really the fourth quarter snaps at running back. There were a couple of plays where McCaffrey would come in for one snap at a time, lined up at wide receiver a lot, made a couple of crucial catches.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, had one on a slant. That was a real tight throw by Purdy.
Yeah, and he looked pretty spry, but you could also see he was receiving treatment on the sideline and could really only make it work one snap at a time. So that bears watching for next week's NFC Championship game between the 49ers and the Eagles. Speaking of that 49er Cowboy game, another running back suffered an injury that they were not so lucky about. It's Cowboys running back Tony Pollard, who suffered a fractured left fibula late in the first half of that Dallas Cowboys loss. He was carted off the field and, well, not carted off the field, but carted off the sideline and ruled out for the game. A fractured left fibula. It's about a 3-month recovery. Pollard is scheduled to be an unrestricted free agent in March. I wonder how different that game looks if Pollard is able to take the second half snaps instead of the unbelievably washed Ezekiel Elliott. Like in the first half of that game, it looked like they were finally splitting the carries the way the Cowboys should have been splitting the carries all season, which is most of them for Tony Pollard and the leftovers for Ezekiel Elliott, and not like a 50-50 split.
This is another great example of why having a general manager with an emotional attachment is not a good thing for your team. Royals fans, you probably know something about that. With Dayton Moore, who did that for 16 years and was always, the player's GM. Sometimes that doesn't work out for you. This is like the Cowboys to a T ever since they last won a Super Bowl at the end of the 1995 season. Jerry Jones has his guys. He loves his guys. Guys like playing for Jerry Jones because he takes care of them. Mm-hmm. You know who especially likes playing for Jerry Jones because they get taken care of? Guys like Ezekiel Elliott, because they will get whatever they want and they're going to get treated properly. He's under contract through 2027.
Yeah.
He's done. He's toast. He doesn't have any juice, man. None.
Zero burst.
And it's not even the last play of the game, which we will get to in full next segment. Don't worry. We will get there.
I can't wait.
But I mean, you watch him try to break off a run outside, man. He's got nothing. He's got no explosion. Even if he's still got decent speed, just base level speed, he can't. He's going 0 to 60 in 3.4 miles. Like it's not working. It's not there. Pollard's explosiveness is what is making Zeke still effective. So you can do the whole thunder and lightning thing. Although really it's reverse. They need lightning then thunder. Other teams, they try to, wear you down, home run back. The Cowboys can't do that because Zeke stinks. He is washed. He is cooked. It is over. But their cap savings next year, if they cut him, it's only $4 million.
Yeah.
It's $11+ million dead money next year.
And it could cost him Pollard.
It almost certainly will. Some other team's going to see him and say, oh, yeah. Like a team that has cap space and a need for a really good running back who can eat some carries for a year or two, oh, yeah, it's going to cost him Pollard.
So one other injury note that I should get to here regarding Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen, who had that elbow injury he suffered back in week 9 against the New York Jets. He told the media today at his postseason media availability that injury resulted in him having to change his throwing motion, and that it wasn't until 2 weeks ago that he was able to get back to what he likes mechanically. Allen did also say there are no plans for any offseason surgeries or medical procedures on the elbow, and that rest and recovery will be the best thing for it. It's interesting when you look at his numbers. Before the injury, weeks 1 through 9, Josh Allen completed 64% of his passes, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. After the injury, and not including the playoffs, so this is just regular season stuff, Allen completed 63% of his pass, 62.5, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Actually had a higher adjusted completion percentage post-injury than pre-injury. And said that it wasn't until the playoffs until they were able to get back to mechanically what Josh Allen is most comfortable with. I think the larger problem with the Bills, and it came back finally to bite them and eliminate them from the playoffs, one of the larger issues that the Bills have on offense right now is they are too dependent on Josh Allen. He has to do everything for them because they can't really run the ball. They could not run the ball. When they tried, they couldn't do it, so they abandoned it altogether against the Bengals. They can't really run the ball. And Stephon Diggs is awesome, but the rest of their receivers, I know Shakir had his moments, and obviously Tony Romo has a Gabe Davis man crush, and whatever happens with Gabe Davis moving forward, he'll always have that playoff game against the Chiefs last year when it looked like he was going to become a superstar. But the other weapons, I mean, he's throwing to Cole Beasley in a playoff game. Cole Beasley was a street free agent. He was retired. He was a retired player, and he's out there getting targets in a playoff game. They aren't multidimensional enough. They are too dependent on Josh Allen, who he is, and what he brings. And until they get a little less dependent, until they get Josh Allen some help, they might be bumping their heads against the ceiling a little bit of what it's going to be for them. That they're going to be just short. They've pretty clearly been passed in the AFC hierarchy by the Bengals, who are 60 minutes of football away from back-to-back Super Bowls. The Chiefs were always ahead of the Bills. Even though the Bills could beat them in the regular season, the Chiefs had the 2 playoff wins as the trump card. So moving forward for the Bills, they got a lot of things to figure out. Again, if you missed our conversation with Matt Verderame earlier in the show, highly recommend checking that out on the podcast or on the YouTube video archive. He joined us at the bottom of the first hour, the 3 o'clock hour earlier today. And he talked about a lot of decisions the Bills have to make financially right now. And it really makes you value and respect more what the Chiefs have done in their current situation. Because when you have the star quarterback, when you have the face of the franchise under center, you have the opportunity to build around them on a rookie contract, and then you have to figure out how to make it work when you pay that quarterback what he's owed. So you have the initial window, and then you have to figure out what that second window is going to look like. Like the Bengals are not there yet. They've still got Burrow on the rookie deal. Burrow's going to want his extension sooner rather than later. I wouldn't be shocked if it got done this offseason. The Bengals, by the way, notoriously cheap, historically, notoriously cheap as a franchise. They have fewer scouts than any other team in the National Football League. Does that sound like a franchise that is going to find a way to open up the coffers for Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon? Yeah, I don't know. So the Bengals are going to have to figure out what that looks like. When they're paying Burrow, what is it going to look like around him? What do the complementary pieces look like? Are they able to continue to have success in the draft, have success with player development, and continue to keep the level of the roster, the talent on the roster as high when you're not paying the quarterback peanuts? The Bills are just now into that window with Josh Allen. He's got his big deal. And they are now, this is a very pivotal offseason for him, going to have to figure out, okay, how do we put this together? How do we draft? How do we scout? How do we put together a high-level roster around Josh Allen so we are not so dependent on this talented quarterback to get us to the promised land? And why you appreciate that as a fan of the Chiefs is that's the window the Chiefs are in right now, too. Like, they're into that second window with Patrick Mahomes where they are paying him big money and they have to figure out how to make the rest of the roster work around that. And here they are in the AFC Championship game because their rookie class was immense this year. And when you look at Jalen Watson and Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis, and when you look at last year's rookie class too, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, when you look at a guy like Nick Bolton, those are guys that the Chiefs have for the cheap for the next 3 to 4 years. And they look like above average starters in this league. You have to have that kind of talent on rookie contracts if you're paying your quarterback buku bucks. So the Chiefs, they figured it out. They did it. And here they are back in the AFC Championship game because they've drafted really exceptionally well and found starters in early rounds, starters in middle rounds, and starters in late rounds in the last 2 drafts. They've made it work. Now we have to find out if the Bills can. And that's the state of things in Buffalo right now. Continuing our Blue Dot of Kansas headlines, if you're noticing a distinct lack of Brendan Wrzinski on the program right now, don't worry. He is fine. He had to step out and conclude work on the 580 Preps Coaches Club, which will air at 6 o'clock here on 580 WIBW and FM 104.9. So he'll be back in just a moment. But we continue on with our Blue Dot of Kansas headlines here on 580 Sports Talk. By this time tomorrow, we should know who comprises the Baseball Hall of Fame class of 2023. Maybe I should rephrase that. We will know if there will be a Hall of Fame class of 2023 because the trends suggest, based on ballots that have been made public, that it's going to be down to the wire close for 2 candidates in particular, the former Philadelphia and St. Louis third baseman Scott Rowland and the former Colorado first baseman Todd Helton. I can tell you this. If at this time tomorrow, Todd Helton is a Hall of Famer, I will be weeping on camera. I will be so happy that I will be moved to tears. Just know that that's going to happen. If indeed Todd Helton gets the call from the Hall tomorrow, joining Larry Walker as the only Rockies to make the Hall of Fame. I will be so delighted you have no idea. But it's going to be tight. Both Rowland and Helton are around 79% on the public ballots. Ryan Thibodeau, at Not Mr. Tibbs on Twitter, does the public service of compiling all the public ballots from articles and publicly posted ballots on social media and compiles the voting totals. And right now, Rowland and Helton are both in that 78, 79% range, which you need to be on 75% of the ballots to get in. Well, these are just the public ballots. And it's only about 45 to 50% of the ballots that are made public because people can choose whether or not to make their ballots public. So with the other half of ballots that come in, generally what you see is the public support and the private support are not the same. So you can probably expect to see the vote total for Helton and the vote total for Rowland and really everybody's vote total dip slightly from the non-public ballots. And that dip might sink both Rowland and Helton below the 75% threshold, which would leave nobody from this 2023 Hall of Fame ballot getting into the Hall of Fame. Personally, I think it's really, really dumb that the voters, the Baseball Writers Association voters for the Hall of Fame, would put nobody in the Hall of Fame, would give no reason to come to Cooperstown in the summer, would leave no players to celebrate for the whole of 2023. But then again, it would also be very in character of the Baseball Writers Association to do something so thoughtless and so stupid.
Doesn't that suck? Like, we're at a point, because it's not just people who love baseball, live for baseball. Like, anyone who pays any amount of attention to baseball and its Hall of Fame realize that we need to be cynical about it because there's no benefit of the doubt for the voters or really for Major League Baseball as a whole a lot of times. But, like, we shouldn't, to echo your point, we should never be in a position where we go an entire year where, you know what? There's not really anyone worth celebrating this year, huh?
Yeah.
Like, man, there's been tens of thousands of professional baseball players all time. We can't do anything.
Unfortunately, we've turned it into this really sour, instead of being a celebration of guys' careers, it's turned into this really curdled steroid debate or personal ethics debate about whether or not you should vote for the steroid guys. Like Alex Rodriguez is on the ballot. Like Alex Rodriguez is one of the 2 or 3 best baseball players I've ever seen in my entire life. I know he did steroids. He got caught. And if that's like a divining rod for a voter, or a dividing line, that's a better term, for a voter to say, with Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, there's some ambiguity, and steroids weren't illegal in baseball explicitly for the bulk of their careers. So I can justify a vote for those guys. But with A-Rod, he did it, and he got caught, and he got suspended a whole year. And that's why I'm not going to vote for Alex Rodriguez. That's why I'm going to say that Alex Rodriguez, objectively one of the most talented people to ever put on a baseball uniform, is not a Hall of Fame baseball player. Like, okay, like I kind of get that. But is that fun to talk about? No. We're going to talk about all those dingers A-Rod hit.
Would you rather they go to a format like the Pro Football Hall of Fame does, where there's a set number or range that can get in every year?
I do. Because at this point, I used to be really in favor of, keep it small, keep it exclusive, make it hard. It should be hard to get into the Hall of Fame. Well, now it's so hard that the greatest hitter of his generation and the greatest pitcher of his generation and the guy who's all-time hits leader, which I know Pete Rose is a separate debate, and I'm fine with him never getting in. He's kind of a scumbag all the way around. I'm okay.
About it.
Yeah, I'm not going to lose an ounce of sleep over Pete Rose. But the idea that you can have a baseball museum and no mention of like the greatness of Barry Bonds, who won 7 MVPs, or Roger Clemens, who won 7 Cy Youngs, or Alex Rodriguez, who hit over 600 home runs, or Manny Ramirez even, or Sammy Sosa, or Mark McGwire. It's ludicrous to me. It's erasure of an entire era of baseball history. And pretending it didn't happen, I think, is worse than saying, well, if you put them all in, you honor people who cheated. No, you honor their accomplishments, but you can also point out that there's context to those accomplishments. That's what a museum does, right? It celebrates accomplishments, and then it provides context. It tells the story. We're not putting these guys up for sainthood. We're just saying they were awesome at baseball, and they did a lot of really awesome baseball things, and they made baseball fans out of people.
Yeah.
But even putting that aside, I used to be really about a smaller Hall of Fame. Then they put Harold Baines in, and I stopped caring. Just put baseball guys in who did cool stuff.
And Jack Morris.
Yeah, they put Jack Morris in. I about lost my mind. The best pitcher of the 80s, my ass. Dave Stieb was twice the pitcher Jack Morris was. I'm sorry. I'm going to rant.
It's okay.
I'm glad you're back.
It's our show.
It is. I'm glad you're back. I told the audience already, if by tomorrow at this time we know that Todd Helton is a Hall of Famer, I'm going to be sobbing.
Good. You should be. That's a perfect point in the in the favor of we should have something to celebrate. It's an issue that baseball, and this is getting into an entirely different thing about being able to market stars and market the game and encouraging people to enjoy the game as it is, which Rob Manfred has never done. I know the Hall of Fame is a different thing, but there should be more reasons to celebrate.
Yes.
Yes, Todd Helton belongs in the Hall of Fame because he was awesome. And also people are going to love that. People are going to buy tickets to go to the Hall of Fame to see that. People are going to make the cross country trip from Denver to Cooperstown to see that. Or I don't know how many, what the Rockies fandom diaspora looks like across the U.S. But people will come up from Florida or Virginia or wherever to go see Todd Helton. We should celebrate. We should say, hey, look at this awesome stuff that Todd Helton did. Look at this sick stuff that
Scott Rowland did.
Alex, whoever.
Yeah.
Why not?
It should be a celebration of the game rather than, we're talking about, well, this person made the choice to do these drugs. And it's okay, yeah. Contextualize it. Contextualize why that was allowed in the 1990s and the 2000s, why that was swept under the rug when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were hitting all these home runs and everybody knew something was kind of hinky, but nobody said anything about it because the commissioner of baseball the guy in charge of the game while Bonds and Clemens and Sosa and McGwire and A-Rod were in their primes, he's in the damn Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
And
so that guy can go in.
Yes, we put Bud Selig in, but we won't put any museum that will celebrate Bud Selig but not Barry Bonds is probably not a museum worth all of this time caring about. But no. I can't help it because I love baseball.
With that, that'll finish up our 580 Sports Talk headlines brought to you by Blue Dot of Kansas. You can go check our friends out online. Their website is bluedotkansas.com. We've got to take a quick break. We'll talk NFL divisional round weekend coming up after this on 580 Sports Talk. Coming up at the top of the 6 o'clock hour, right after 580 Sports Talk, we've got today's edition of the 580 Preps High School Boys Basketball Coaches Club, recapping all the mid-season tournament action for boys high school basketball here in the city. All 8 coaches joining us on the show tonight. Super excited about that. That's coming up at the top of the hour. We'll start with Mike Williams from Highland Park, by the way. Highland Park winners of the TIT. Appreciate the kind words from Mark in the YouTube comments saying, appreciative of the broadcast on Thursday and Friday. Said very proud of Topeka High, Topeka High grad. Topeka High's got 2 wins this season. I tell you what, man, we saw them a couple days in a row. That is a way better team than a 2-win program. Gio Lyons, their head coach, we'll talk to him a little bit later on tonight. He's got that thing going in the right direction. Their whole starting lineup is all juniors and sophomores. They're going to turn a corner, and I'm 100% certain of that. Really, really fun showing from every one of the Topeka teams at the TIT this weekend. West finished in 3rd place. Park won it. Both Hayden and High improved on their finishes from last year. So really fun weekend of basketball at the TIT.
Yeah, I liked watching all of them play. Hayden's Joe Hotting was a blast. He was out there playing like Nikola Jokic.
He really does have that game, though.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of that to him in the post. So I really enjoyed watching him play. And then Highland Park, boy, it's hard to go undefeated. So I'm not calling that shot yet, but I'd love to see the team that beats them because they are something else.
And again, I mean, okay, sure. Some of the teams that are in the Meadowlark Conference probably athletically lacking in comparison to Highland Park. Lawrence is a top 10 team in the biggest class in the state and has been to 7 of the last 8 state tournaments. And they lost by double digits and never led after the 3-minute mark against that Highland Park team. They are legit. They are so good. If you get a chance to head out to the pressure cooker at some point for a Highland Park game, do it. It will be worth it. Although I would say the same about any of our teams in the city, obviously. NFL playoffs this weekend, divisional round. Where do you want to start? Because we could certainly argue, not Giants-Eagles weekend, that's just a footnote. We'll get to that last. Bengals, obviously, huge win. They dominated the Bills. That was a very highly, anticipated game. We also had Mike McCarthy's brain leak out of his ears like hot pudding at the end of the game last night with a play that made last year's Cowboys loss to the Niners in the playoffs with Dak Prescott running down the middle of the field with no time left. That made that look like Bill Walsh's original playbook, like genius stuff. It's unbelievably stupid. Unfathomably stupid.
Let's recap the highlights of that final drive by the Dallas Cowboys, which, by the way, started with 51 seconds left inside their own 10-yard line with no timeouts. They had 4th and 10 at their own 18 with 2:50 left and the clock ticking, and just kind of lollygagged the punt team out to the field instead of calling a timeout there, trying to save some time right there on the spot and see if they get a 3-and-out with the help of the 2-minute warning and have a little bit more time potentially to operate on offense if you get the 3-and-out that they eventually got. No, they lollygagged the punt team on the field, leading to Greg Olsen saying the cursed phrase, "They have to hurry up and punt this," which is a phrase that should never, ever be said of all time in any NFL scenario. We had a failure to get off a hurry up punt, which is just disastrous. Anyway, so the Cowboys screwed that up. That's nothing new. Mike McCarthy screws up the clock in those situations all the time. It's what he does. It's his stock and trade. Anyhow, Cowboy defense, which, by the by, played pretty good.
Played really well.
They held the 49ers to 19. If you told me that before the game, I would have told you I think the Cowboys have a really good chance.
And that's with Purdy, I think, playing a pretty decent game, too.
Yes. Now, his receivers made some spectacular catches. But yes, Purdy did not make – we are still waiting for Brock Purdy to make the Iowa State Purdy mistake.
I will tell you, though, brother, first half.
Yeah.
He's on the near sideline on the TV view. He spins back to the end zone, and I thought, oh, my God, this is going to be a spectacular disaster. But it wasn't.
No.
It didn't end up being a disaster.
Threw it out of bounds.
Which is the ultimate sign of growth for maybe any NFL player all year, that we didn't get Brock Purdy spiking a ball to a defender like he did in his final Cheez-It Bowl. Although I really wanted it.
Yeah, we're still waiting on that mistake. And the part of me that watched Brock Purdy for 4 years at Iowa State really firmly believes that's coming at some point. But that didn't happen, and that's a credit to Purdy and a credit to Kyle Shanahan and the weapons that Shanahan has around Brock Purdy. But anyway, Dallas gets the 3-and-out, and they get the ball back with 51 seconds left. On the first play from inside,
Elijah Mitchell, go down in bounds.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know what Elijah Mitchell's thinking about. Because they didn't get a 3-and-out. Yeah, they went out of bounds before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gained 30 yards, and it didn't work.
Yeah, he ran out of bounds and stopped the clock. So the Cowboys catch a break, and they get the ball back with 51 seconds left and no timeouts. And on the first play, Dak Prescott rolls out and just bumps into Eric Armstead in the end zone. He gets lucky that Armstead doesn't want to get called for roughing the passer and just kind of leaves him be, just kind of chests him and ends up throwing a pass out of bounds. Then the Cowboys are able to move the ball down the field a little bit, but out of timeouts, Dalton Schultz catches the pass along the sideline and then kind of just goes out of bounds, but does so while moving backwards so the clock doesn't stop. So the Cowboys have to hurry to the line, throw another sideline pass to Dalton Schultz, at which point he forgets the NFL rules and doesn't get his second foot down, making the catch. He half-asses that. So the Cowboys, down to the final snap of their season, they have to go 76 yards in 5 seconds. Like, Hail Mary's not going to do it. You've got to go pitchy, woo-woo. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
They send Ezekiel Elliott out to snap the football. And San Francisco calls timeout, saying, okay, all right, they're going to do something real stupid. All right. Obviously, something dumb is going to happen. Let's just make sure we account for Ezekiel Elliott's presence on the field. If they come out and they line up like that again, surely they won't. They only did that to try and throw us off. They knew we had a full boat of timeouts and we're going to call one. Dallas comes out in the exact same damn formation with 4 guys, 2 linemen to the left, and 5 guys, 2 linemen to the right, and Ezekiel Elliott as the center, snapping to Dak Prescott in the shotgun. Zeke snaps to Dak Prescott and then gets thrown back 10 miles an hour like he's being hit by a small car.
Made a dent in the Earth's crust.
Prescott zips a pass to Keontae Turpin 7 yards down the field. Also 7 yards down the field, 2 ineligible receivers. I think the officials were so startled they didn't bother to throw a flag, but there's no way that play should have counted or should have been allowed. It was obviously ineligible man downfield. But, like, you can see the concept, right? Get the ball out to Turpin. He'll lateral the ball to either the receiver on that side or Elliott, and then you've got some linemen, and you go from there. And you just try and see what you can do. Keontae Turpin gets driven 7 yards deep into the earth's crust by Fred Warner, and that's the ball game. That's the end of that play. A 7-yard completion with Ezekiel Elliott as your center. That's the final play of the Dallas Cowboys 2022 season.
I was laughing maniacally as this was going on, and my wife was sitting next to me. She said, I don't get it. Like, what are they doing? I said, well, I think it's so they can get as much speed on the field as possible. They have a couple big guys to block on the edges, but they want as many guys as, fast guys as possible. It just is very stupid. It isn't going to work. And then it didn't.
I got lightheaded. I laughed and yelled so loud.
It's just unfathomably stupid, except it is understandable because it's Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and this is who they are. Like, Dallas has got a talented roster. You can stack their roster up 1 through 53, and it holds up pretty good against just about any team in the NFL. It really does. But they're poorly coached, and they don't have a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow or a Josh Allen or an Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. They have Dak Prescott instead. And Dak Prescott is fine, but I think we've seen the limits of what you're going to get with Dak Prescott. And you've certainly seen the limits of what you're going to get with Mike McCarthy.
Most impressive performance of the weekend, Bills or Eagles?
Man,
I'm sorry, Bengals or Eagles?
Yeah,
certainly not the Bills.
Definitely not the Bills. I got to go Bengals because it was on the road.
Yeah.
It really ratchets up the degree of difficulty, and it was against a better team. But a real quick thought about the Eagles.
For sure.
I think after Hurts got hurt for the final 3 weeks of the year, we kind of forgot that they were starting to sandblast people the middle portion of the season, and they looked like by far the best team in the NFC. Like, look at anybody who was, touching them. And then Hurts got injured and they had to play Minshew for a couple of weeks. And we all got distracted by the Brock Purdy storyline. But nah, man, again, roster 1 through 53, the Eagles have the best in the NFC. And if they are able to keep Hurts upright on Sunday, I think they're going to the Super Bowl. They have an awesome team. But Matt Verderame pointed this out when we talked to him in the 3 o'clock hour. They have not yet seen the quarterback who can really test their defense.
That's true.
And I'm not sure that they're going to on Sunday. Again, maybe I am being a hater. Maybe I'm not quick enough to jump on the Brock Purdy express. But
it's a difficult situation because in theory, could Brock Purdy go ball out and be awesome? Sure. But even their passing game is so set up by the physicality up front and by their run action. And if that gets totally shut down by that really good Eagles front seven and you become a one-dimensional 49ers team, can they beat you that way? That, to me, is more so why they went out and got Trey Lance, even than his, and I know sounds like a different argument, but when they moved 3 draft picks to get him, yeah, he's a great runner and he's an incredible athlete, and that adds another dimension to that run game, but he's got a big arm, a freaking massive arm. He can do things with that huge arm that can still change things in the passing game where, hey, we can't run. We're facing the best front we've played all year. We cannot run the ball. We need to make a play in the passing game. Jimmy G was never that guy.
No.
And for what they asked him to do most of the time, Jimmy G, fine. But we saw it in Super Bowl 54 when they needed Jimmy G to go be a superstar quarterback and passer. He overthrew Emmanuel Sanders with a chance to win the Super Bowl. That's what happened. Brock Purdy, I would imagine, is probably going to be closer in his career to a Jimmy G than he is to Patrick Mahomes. Can you trust him if you need him to go be a passer? And obviously he's not a runner, but you know what I mean? Like, if you need him to go win you a game, which is a lot to ask a rookie, obviously, can he be that guy? We don't know. I'm doubtful, but I guess the thing that benefits the 49ers is we don't really know.
And another thought about the Bengals before we wrap up this segment.
Absolutely.
I think if there's any NFL team out there still looking for a head football coach and they don't at least interview Lou Anarumo, they're doing themselves a disservice. And I think that there are fans in every AFC North city and in Buffalo and in Kansas City that would happily drive Lou Anarumo to his new destination and help him pick out a house themselves.
And they talked about this on the radio. I heard a little bit of the Westwood One broadcast here on 580 yesterday. By the way, Ian Eagle, very good on TV, really good on radio. It was Ian Eagle and Mike Mayock doing the game. That was a good crew. That was a really good crew. But they made Mayock made the point that, hey, look, this Bengals defense does not have a bunch of like great stars. They've got very solid players, like Trey Hendrickson, very solid player. A lot of their defensive backs, maybe not great, but something. I mean, Jesse Bates is probably their best individual talent on the entire defense. But Logan Wilson, just a very good player. Anarumo has turned that into a legitimate monster of a defense, the way it has played in the postseason each of the last 2 years.
And they don't have superstars.
Exactly.
Like they've got a bunch of good players like Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard and Mike Hilton and Von Bell, Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates probably close to a superstar. But like they don't have they don't have the maybe the name brand guys, and so that tells you that Anarumo is the guy who can maximize the cards that he's dealt. And when you have a coordinator that does that, I get why DeMeco Ryans is getting interviews. Like he should be a head coach, but Lou Anarumo should be too.
The other guy who should be but can't because he's also still in the playoffs, just like Lou Anarumo. DeMeco Ryans. Go hire him. Anyone, go hire him. I don't care who. He needs to be a head coach.
No, I want to pay Sean Payton $25 million a year and give up 3 draft picks.
Or you can just go get a great coach. But hey, Denver, you do your thing. We've got to take a quick break. We'll preview Big Monday after this on 580 Sports Talk. Big Monday basketball tonight in the Big 12, KU versus Baylor at the Farrell Center. So congrats, Waco. You will sell out the arena for one time all year. This game, it's a traditional ACC Big 12 Big Monday, which means we will probably get the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game in actual time on ESPN News, because that just seems to be how it goes most of the time. KU's an underdog tonight. You had the stat earlier. Bill Self is 5-2 head-to-head against Scott Drew as an underdog.
That's correct.
That's crazy. Baylor's been favored against KU 7 times.
6-1 to the spread, which is 2.5 tonight.
I like that number a lot. Look, KU is almost never an underdog. If you're going to give me points with KU, I'm going to take KU. There's just no doubt about that.
So what would be fascinating to me about this matchup is Baylor's got the 3 guards, right? Flagler, Cryer, and George. And then they've got Jalen Bridges as kind of their stretch wing. And I would imagine Bridges, by virtue of being their best defender, is going to have the assignment of guarding Jalen Wilson. That means that either Grady Dick or Kevin McCullough is going to have something of a size advantage tonight. And we'll see if that's the kind of thing that KU, the kind of advantage that KU can press. This would be a great game to get either of those 2 guys going offensively, take some of the pressure off of Jalen Wilson. The other thing that I think is interesting about this game, the scores of Saturday's Big 12 games were all very telling. Everybody was in the 50s and 60s except for TCU scoring 83 points. But all of the other games in the league were these meat grinder games.
Mm-hmm.
Baylor beat Oklahoma 62-60. I think the final in Oklahoma State, Iowa State was like 51-49 or something like that. So I think we're to that stage now. We're more than a third of the way through the Big 12 season where these games start to be grinders. Like, you've seen enough of your opponent on film. You have a pretty good idea of their strengths and their weaknesses, and you're starting to make it tough on freshmen. Like Keontae George had a really rough game. Oklahoma, not known for their defense, right? And they held George 3 of 12 from the field in 32 minutes. So it starts to get harder at this stage in the Big 12 to score. So I think that's the question for tonight. Who wins a grinded out game? Can Kansas win a grinded out game? They've shown that they can.
Mm-hmm.
And they've shown that they can go and do it on the road.
Need a sidekick, though. It cannot be one guy. And even if the half-court offense sucks, but you get a ton of transition looks, which I'm not necessarily expecting, but if that's how it ends up, okay, fine, you got to that point. But someone other than Jalen Wilson has to take the mantle. Hell, Jalen's played really well defensively the last 2 games. That's not getting looked at because he's put up 30-plus in each of the last 2. He's actually played pretty well on the defensive end, which I know was a big thing for him going into this year. Can it be Dick? Can it be Harris? Maybe McCullough, although I doubt it. Hopefully KJ Adams gets back in a groove. If it's just going to be Jalen Wilson on 5 again, though, it's not going to matter, and Baylor's going to win. I'll take KU. If you're going to make KU an underdog, I'm going to take it, but someone's got to step up. Who's it going to be? Hopefully we'll find out pretty quickly. We've got to take one more break.
I'm taking KU too, yeah.
All right, we're both on KU. Perfect. I had to make sure we got that in. We got to take a break. Final words next on 580 Sports Talk.
Teacher.
conclusion. You better wrap it up.
Wrapping up 580 Sports Talk with the final word, including some breaking news, Dan.
Yeah, Jeff Passan reporting that the Kansas City Royals are trading center fielder Michael A. Taylor to the Minnesota Twins, to which I say, great trade. Who'd they get?
I will say, I don't care who they got.
That's the joke.
Oh, well, okay. Whatever. I'll take that one. Final word for me. Hey, KU, please go win this game because 3 straight losses, I can't handle it. I can't handle the discourse. So go get a win. Watch all the highlights on SportsCenter with SVP tonight. It'll be great. Go win. All the bad feelings from Saturday will just melt away. We'll all feel great about it. Coming up tomorrow on 580 Sports Talk, we will talk to Michael Swain of Fog.net. We will preview K-State next in action. They'll be playing tomorrow night, so we'll preview that game. And, of course, we've got more on Chiefs versus Bengals. For Dan Lucero, I'm Brendan Dworzinski. 580 Sports Talk is back tomorrow at 3. At the top of the hour, we've got the 580 Preps High School Coaches Club.